My links.
Tired today.
Let's see. Good morning.
30 seconds.
All right. Got my tissue handy today.
Big news. I have some important news for you.
Interesting news.
It's Blake and Aaron's Spilling the Tea with Sandy.
K-Man's top news headlines of the day from CMR.
Happy Monday, Sandy.
Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. How are you?
A good weekend.
Yeah, I was actually sick this weekend, so.
Oh, that stinks.
I know.
The whole island, it's going around.
So.
Hey, Miles was sick for like 6 days.
Yeah.
It was not fun.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good guy.
Knock on wood, my kids are not sick now.
Going back to school today.
Oof. Oh, you didn't go to school all last week?
No.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh, tough.
Anyway, what you got for us this Monday morning headline?
All right. Well, we've got some individual being busted over the weekend and a flight from Canada with some firearms.
All that.
Yeah, we just talked about that.
What is that all about?
Pretty crazy, really. But yes, quite a bit of ammunition as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah.
But a passenger from Canada arrived in Grand Cayman with 3 guns, a 9mm pistol, 12-gauge shotgun, and a 9mm semi-automatic rifle.
Crazy.
Yeah, pretty crazy. So thank God that CBC were able to.
And how did they find that?
That's their job. So
I know.
Thank God they do their job well.
But they scan it coming.
So yeah, I mean
they
didn't give any. They didn't give any details.
Okay,
They
it was like,
just
were
say
they
because
tipped
of the
off, or-
skills and training
Okay.
that they were able to make such a fine. So thank goodness for that.
Hmm.
And speaking of customs, 24 new officers have actually joined CBC. So hopefully they've been trained really well to find stuff like this. So congratulations to all 24 of them who went through 21 weeks of intense training. And this is the largest graduating class for CBC to date.
Wow.
So yeah, they got a bunch of awards, best academic performance in their exams, best research paper, and so on, most improved. So congratulations to all of those individuals.
All right.
Oh, they need 24 more traffic police.
Yeah.
Congratulations also going out to Mr. Gilbert McLean, who was appointed the NRA board chairman. Now, this is interesting because Mr. McLean is also the chairman of the UCCI board as well. So it looks like he's got his hands full. So we wish him the best of luck because those are 2 very massive projects.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
All right.
Data protection. According to that office, the Ombudsman's office, they're claiming, remember when DMS did the whole COVID vaccine drive and this lady walked away with, was it $100,000?
Yeah.
What did she walk away with?
Yeah.
A lot of money.
$100,000, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a lot of money.
Don Bodden.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So they claim that the COVID-19 vaccine challenge breached the Data Protection Act. It's a little bit strange because I remember being involved in like interviewing people on the back end of this as it was happening. And one of the big concerns was always to be in compliance specifically with the Data Protection Act. And I remember them actually asking people from that office what they could and couldn't do. Certain bits of information was not actually passed on to them. It was handled by the people who had the information in the first instance, which would have been the HSA. So I'm a little bit confused at why this is now an issue and how this has come about. So very, very bizarre. But anyway, I'll dig a little bit more into that situation.
We know you will.
Yeah.
So Cayman has opened its first US-based office. So congratulations in this historic, what they say is a historic moment for the Cayman Islands government. We've officially opened an office in Washington, D.C. on Thursday, January 26th by the Ministry of Financial Services and Commerce. Approximately 60 persons, including fellow Caribbean countries and representatives from the British Embassy, actually attended. Former members of Congress were also there, and DC industry stakeholders. So congratulations. And the young man who is going to be running the office is Mr. Chris Dugan.
Yeah.
So congrats to him.
Cool.
Yeah. He
Yep.
was he's a great guy.
What are they
Yeah.
going to be doing there?
Used to work with Dart.
Compliance or something?
Did you say
It's supposed to be like a liaison office where they do
did you
I
say
guess
there's
more
60 people working there?
No, that
um
ended the opening.
Oh.
Yeah.
no, that's people who attended the opening. So I think it's more of like a, what's the word I'm looking for? Oh, I can't quite find the word, but lobbying type of an office and educating people in the US about what it is that we do here in the Cayman Islands, and that we're not just about laundering money.
Hey, man, we're not Delaware.
Yeah,
That's
exactly, right?
Whoa,
That's what I'm saying.
right?
Well, very cool.
So those are your news headlines today.
All right, Sandy, thanks for that. Of course,
Thank
you
you.
can catch Sandy's show right now on our sister station, Bobo 89.1 FM. We'll see you back here on KISS tomorrow morning, about
Awesome.
7:25 for our Tuesday headlines. All right.
All right, folks. Good morning to everyone. Let's go ahead and kick off the show. Hope you guys had a fabulous weekend.
Bigger, better, bolder. The cold, hard truth is taking talk to the next level. Right here on Bobo 89.1 FM, Cayman's Community Radio.
We are still spilling the tea.
And committed to being part of the change that Cayman so desperately needs. Join Sandy Hill weekdays from 7:30 a.m. for Premier Access, Cayman Voices, Truthful Thursdays, and much more. Cayman's #1 talk show is now bigger, better, bolder, and more than talk. Getting results with hot topics, consumer reports, court exposés, and more.
I've come to set the record straight. I've come to shine the light on you. Let me introduce myself. I am the cold, hard truth.
Now, from the CMR studio in Grand Cayman,
Live, direct.
it's the cold, hard truth. Now, join the conversation on 345-936-2626.
That number again is
345-936-2626.
All right, folks. Welcome. Thank you guys so much for tuning in this morning. As you can hear, sounds like Sandy got something. Still not COVID. Looks like I just came down with a cold. Oh my gosh, can you guys imagine? What to do? Oh my goodness. Trying to survive it. I feel like I slept most of the weekend because I really think that for me, there's definitely a direct correlation between getting sick and not getting enough rest. Like I can really, really tell when it's coming because I have to sleep an exorbitant amount when normally I'm not really a person that sleeps that much. But whenever I see my body start to go into this hibernation stage where I feel it necessary to sleep, then I'm like, here we go. It's coming. You try to offset it, as much as you possibly can. So Oops, there we go. Sorry. I hate to take medicine, as you guys know. But I am going to be taking some Buckley's Honey Chill. Y'all know that tastes like, ugh. Mostly just congestion. Remember on Friday, I thought it was my sinuses. And I was like, oh my gosh, my sinuses are really bothering me. And then it kind of, Friday during the day, it was kind of okay. And then by Friday night, I'm like, oh no, this is more than sinuses. This is something else. So there we have it. But most of it is just nasal related. A little bit of a cough, but not much cough actually. And Friday afternoon, I had a little bit of a sore throat. So lots of nasal and sinus congestion, and then it's like between congestion and drainage. So I did some Vicks this morning. Where's my office Vicks, by the way? Child, I got one of those, I feel like, in every room right now. So let's see how much Buckley's can we take. You got to be careful not to overdo it. So it says 1 teaspoon, take 2. What does it say? Take 210. Hold on, that can't be possibly right. That sounds like an overdose on Buckley's. Good morning, James, Wee, Felicia, Teresa. I'm trying to read these instructions. So it says that adults, so every 4 to 6 hours, 12 and older, 1 teaspoon, take 2. At the next dose, oh, I'm supposed to be taking 2. Maybe that's what's going on. Do not take more than 60 in 24 hours. Okay. We're going to take 1 because I don't really like to take medicine if I can help it. So we'll do 10 ml. Yes. Yes, honey chill. And this stuff is so thick and disgusting. My daughter's like, why do you take it if it tastes so nasty? And I'm like, because you want to try to feel better. Right? Mm-hmm. Yuck. Yeah, they make it strong. What do old people say? That'll put some hair on your chest. Wow. Woo. There's like a little bit left in there. I'll drink that in a little bit. Woo-wee. Good morning. Okay, man. What a beautiful day. Despite the cold. You know, kids are so funny. My daughter says to me, Mom, why are you going to do your show if you're sick? And I say, well, because I have to go to work. You know, you got to go to work sometimes when you're sick. And so it is what it is. All right. So thank you guys so much. Friday's show was a little bit crazy in the fact that it was brutally truthful and honest. And we talked about some of these MPs. I'm not quite done with them yet, believe it or not. Because the more I think about them and the more I talk about them, the more information comes to my attention. And unfortunately, it's the same culprits over and over again. And it's not a good situation. I'm fact-finding about something else that I heard on Friday that leaves me extremely disappointed. I don't know how hard it is for MPs to be professional, but it looks like we got a real problem with that with some members of the PAC government. And, you know, they need to hurry up and put that code of conduct in place, because surely that code of conduct includes this type of behavior being behavior they can be held accountable for. It occurred to me that perhaps what they are doing is they're trying to get all their bad behavior out before the code of conduct comes in place. So they're cursing out everybody, telling everybody how they feel up until that point. I mean, I just don't know. It sounds crazy, but it's a theory that I have, you know, because when you have a certain type of personality, you think, oh yes, I can just adjust my behavior and be on my best behavior after the code of conduct is implemented, because we're going to try to drag that out proverbially from now until kingdom come. Some people, oh, this tea is really good this morning. What kind of tea is this? Super blend. It tastes nice. Some people just don't have no behavior, child. No behavior whatsoever. And you really show your true colors. And I can't help but think that the very people that we send here to govern us, people like the governor and stuff, that we accuse, some of us want to accuse of certain things. Those very same people look back at us and say, it's this type of behavior why we say that y'all have no behavior, you're not cultured, you're a bunch of friggin' savages. I'm not going to get started on it this morning. Give me a couple days, because I want to get all my ducks in a row and all my facts lined up. Because when I drop this bombshell on y'all, I think that you're going to be very, very shocked to find out what else your MPs have been up to. And I'm disappointed. And the more information I receive, the more it goes from disappointment to legitimately being upset. Because, we give these people an opportunity to work on our behalf, and then they end up embarrassing us in the most spectacular way. No behavior, no bringing up, no, what can I just call it? Bring up, see? Yeah, none of that. Anyway, we're going to get to that. So this morning, we're going to be talking about catcalling. This is a very emotive situation. And I completely understand why people feel a particular way about it. For those of us who are real animal lovers, the thought of having to cull anything doesn't give you any pleasure. But I've done a bit of research on this situation, and unfortunately, this is one of those things that is it's a situation that we ourselves have created, if that makes any sense. And so what you'll find is that, unfortunately, we've created a situation that does not have an easy fix. And now we've got to do something about it. You know what is most amazing is that brought up, see, thank you so much to the listener. They're like, no, the word you're looking for is brought up, see. So here's the thing, right? As in most things, we are not unique in our perspective on this. We're not unique in the solutions even that we come up with. There's only so many possible solutions to things in the world, is what I find. And thank you, KK. KK says, yes, I don't expect anything good from them. I'm so over them right about now. Brought up, see, yes. So we have a situation where, I've been doing a bit of research on this topic, thinking, what have other people done? Has anybody else done something that has actually worked? Because it's one thing to say, listen, we don't want the indigenous species to die out, because that would be horrific, right? We've got to protect them as much as possible. The feral cats are out in the wild. Is there anything we can do to protect the feral cats? And so I've looked at other jurisdictions that have attempted to do stuff. And to be honest, I've seen no other available solution that has worked. And so this leads me to the people who are against the feral, cat calling, to give us a solution. What do you think will work? And what research do you have to back up that that's actually worked in other jurisdictions? Because this is something, once again, that is not unique to the Cayman Islands and that has impacted other places in the world. So before our guests come on at 8 o'clock this morning, I want to preface the conversation with a bit more details and a bit more information. So let's take Australia as an example. This is a case study here. This was a report from March of last year from the federal parliament, which was recommending cat registration, nighttime curfews, and spraying and neutering. So the headline, this is from Smithsonian Magazine. I'll give you guys a link so you can read it for yourselves. The headline says that Australia's cats kill 2 billion animals annually. And here's how the government is responding to the crises. because it is a crisis, right? You have the possibility that feral cats will make other species completely extinct. So what are we talking about in Australia? So here's somebody named Christine Ellis. The story starts out, says Christine Ellis doesn't like feral cats. As an Aboriginal Walpiri ranger, you know, the Aboriginals were there before anybody else, right? So all of us are Johnny come latelys compared to the Aboriginals. They were there first. And so they have a very long history of oral history and traditional history being passed down. And they oftentimes had a lot more respect for Mother Nature than we do. So she's an Aboriginal ranger at the New Haven Wildlife Sanctuary in central Australia's Great Sandy Desert. She says that she knows what they can do to Australia's native animals. In just 230 years since their introduction to the continent. So again, be very, very clear who's ultimately to blame for feral cats. Human beings. Human beings domesticated, introduced them into the wild. Human beings don't spade and neuter their animals, including dogs and cats. And so when they get out of control, the population, you know, gets completely out of control. Ultimately, we are to blame for that situation. Okay? So as human beings, we've created a situation that now we don't want to fix because we're like, oh, well, gosh, we can't cull feral cats. So here's what this story goes on to say, that in just over 230 years since their introduction to the continent, feral cats have wiped out more than a dozen species that lived alongside Ellis's people for millennia and pushed others to the brink of extinction. As she puts it, there are no stories without cats. So cats had arrived in Australia with the first European settlers back in 1788. So they weren't there before. Within 70 years, cats had spread throughout the country, and they now inhabit 99.9% of Australia's total land area. Like all of Australia, basically, right? On a yearly average, an estimated 2.8 million feral cats roam the continent. But according to John Winarski, who's a conservation biologist at Charles Darwin University and co-author of the books Cats in Australia, Companion and Killer. My apologies. Oh my goodness, sorry. Whoa. Give me a second here. He says that their number can balloon to 5.6 billion in years of heavy rainfall. Oh my goodness, sorry. Just give me 1 second here. My apologies. Y'all are going to have to bear with me today. Woo, might be a rough morning. I got to remember to slow down the talking and drink lots of water. All right. So he says that number of estimated 2.8 million feral cats can actually go up to 5.6 million when they have heavy rainfall. I guess they breed more when there's heavy rainfall. So with its 23 ecosystems, New Haven, which is an area in Northwest Australia, about 1/3 the size of the U.S.'s national Yellowstone National Park, encompasses 1,023 square miles of sand dunes, salt lakes, and red rock encampments. At the sanctuary's heart is a fenced 36 square mile reserve from where Ellis and her colleagues from the Australian Wildlife Conservatory remove feral cats. So feral cats are just defined as escaped pet cats or the descendants of cats that came to Australia aboard the convict transportation ships to create an area where native species could recover. So they're calling in a particular area to attempt to at least keep them out of that area, right? So she goes on to say that Australia's biodiversity is special and distinctive, forged over millions of years of isolation. Many mammal species that survive have been reduced to a minute fragment of their former range and population and are now threatened and continue to decline. Left unmanaged, cats could continue to eat their way through much of the rest of the Australian fauna. So the fence at New Haven was completed in March of 2018, and the enclosure, an area built to keep unwanted animals out, was declared feral predator free the following year. Inside the fence, threatened and reintroduced native species such as the red-tail, what is this? Phascogale and western coil are making a comeback. I'm assuming those are actually birds, but we can look it up to make sure. New Haven is on the front line in Australia's fight to protect its native animals from cats. And with time running out for many species this February, so that was last year, Australia's federal government released a report that confirmed that cats were the primary drivers of mammal extinctions in the country. It's shocking when you think about this, but sorry. So the report asserted that Australia leads the world with 34 such species wiped out and a further 74 land mammal species under threat. It continues to say that faced with this crisis, the report launched Project Noah, which is a plan to increase the number of enclosures like New Haven. So, they've done it on a larger scale. It sounds like my little pharmacist friend here messaging me and saying, good morning, back to your guide sheet. Nothing cold, no oats. I can't have oats, no oranges, etc. Take the mucus relief, guaifenesin, steam inhalers, saline nasal rinse 2 to 4 times daily. Rest your voice and body as much as possible. More honey in your tea. Thank you. I know exactly who that is now. So it goes on to say, and I'm going to find this report for you guys, and I'll share this report, that this Project Noah, which is this plan to increase the number of enclosures like New Haven. The report also recommended greater cooperation between all levels of government in dealing with Australia's feral and pet cats. Pet cats are also a problem because some of y'all let your pet cats roam all over the place. So set up in June of 2020, the committee conducted hearings and received more than 200 submissions from scientists, conservation organizations, and animal welfare groups throughout the second half of 2020. The final report found that every year, each individual feral cat in Australia kills about 390 mammals. Lord Jesus, they're ferocious. 225 reptiles and 130 birds. That adds up. Each year, feral cats kill 1.4 billion. Let me repeat that again. Each year, feral cats kill 1.4 billion native Australian animals, around the same number that died in the catastrophic 2019 and 2020 bushfires, where more than 73,000 square miles burnt. So, the bushfires of 2019, 2020 were catastrophic by all accounts. That's not something that happens on an annual basis. So you have cats doing the same amount of damage as a catastrophic, once in a century probably, bushfire, killing some 1.4 billion native Australian animals. I'm going to find this report for you guys because the link that's here actually isn't working. So give me a second. Because I think y'all need to read the report to really have a good idea of what the scientists, all the specialists, all 200 plus of them, what they found and what recommendations were suggested. Because listen, I'm no expert on this. So as with most things in life, whether it's the pharmacist, the doctor, whoever, I will bow to the experts because they've spent a lifetime learning and in practice, out in the field doing these things. I've seen some of you with your recommendations, but just feed the feral cats and they're going to be fine. And I'm thinking, even me, with as little knowledge and understanding as I have on the subject, know that that's not the solution. Cats are predatory animals, so they're not killing the booby birds just because they're hungry and booby birds is on the menu. They're killing them because that's what they do. Instinctively, they kill, and that's it. It's not about food. It's about killing as a sport. And if you've ever had a cat, which I suspect a lot of you have, dogs don't quite do it as often. Dogs are a little bit different, although some of them will hunt certain types of, I've seen dogs hurt iguanas and whatever. They bring it to you as their master, their pack animals. So they will bring their killing to you and lay it at your front door. And it's not always the most pleasant surprise, I must admit, for them to bring you something. It's never a pleasant surprise because, like, here, I brought you a mouse. I brought you a bird. Now you should be happy. They're not killing for the sake of, oh, God, I'm starving and I have no other option. So if y'all continue to feed me as a feral cat, that's going to resolve the problem. That's actually not going to resolve the problem at all. It's part of who they are. They are just predators. They just instinctively will hunt and kill and then walk away from the kill or take the kill back to a human being as a prize and say, here, look, you happy? All right. So 1.4 billion native Australian animals on an annual basis. The feral cats are not the only problem because they also found that Australia's domesticated pet cats are also killing about 3.8 million, 390 million animals every single year as well. Because a lot of you will, let your domesticated cats roam free at night and do whatever they want. You only call them domesticated because they know to come back to you and they come inside your house, your porch, and get some food. So the report recommended 3 things. Number 1, pet owners should be required to register their cats. I don't actually think this is a bad idea for Cayman either. I think pet registration, microchipping, identification is a great idea of all domesticated cats. Yeah. Just like dogs. Are we still requiring people to register dogs? We did. And then I think some lazy government couldn't be bothered with enforcement. So I want to say that they attempted to remove it. Correct me if I'm wrong, if it's still in place or not. We'll get some answers maybe today. And I need to talk to y'all about dogs as well, because there were several vicious attacks over the weekends on dogs. And this continues to be an area of real primary concern for people, where there are dog attacks that are happening, across this island, and little to nothing is being done about it. So the whole concept of controlling animals is one that we really need to get under control. So I do see our guest who's joining us. I see you. Just give me a little bit more time to go through this particular Smithsonian article here, which I think is very, very useful. So they recommended registering the cats, a measure designed to encourage responsible pet ownership. Again, something that here on this island, we really, really struggle with. The vast majority of people here are not responsible pet owners. And I hate to say it, but the vast majority of them are Caymanians and Caribbean people, because we grew up with this concept that pets are, I don't know, we barely want to domesticate them. The only reason why we domesticate the smaller ones is, oh, they're cute. And, we want to be able to say that we have a little house dog that's like fluffy and cute and something for the kids to play with. Over the weekend, I can't remember who I was talking to. Somebody I was talking to about, that was on Friday. Now I remember who I was talking to. Anyway, a friend about how back in 2009, I was accused of stealing this dog, right? And I remember saying at the time, and I jokingly say it now, but it was the God's truth. You couldn't pay me to steal a dog that ugly. It was a small domesticated dog, but the poor dog had been so ill-treated, and to this day, I cannot imagine having something in your house that you don't even know when the dog went missing. Because the young lady, I forget her name now, Dakers or something, her name was Dakin or something. Anyway, the dog went missing. She didn't even know when the dog went missing. And you know how I knew that? Because I defended myself in the case, which was thrown out, and the judge said it was the most ridiculous thing he'd ever seen, the magistrate. When I saw her plea statements, the first statement claimed the dog went missing on this date. The next statement, months later, after she had the benefit of my statements and my receipts and my discovery documents, she could then say, oh no, the dog actually must have went missing on this day. I'm like, how do you have a dog living in your house and you have no clue when it went missing? Do you want to know how? This is how we are so irresponsible as pet owners. The poor dog was relegated to being on the back porch, screened-in back porch, automatic pet feeder, automatic water feeder. The dog had so little human interaction. She had 2 children, young mother, she was inundated, whatever. And the dog had so little human interaction that the dog was actually, every night at 10 o'clock, the dog would run and create what I called crazy circles. She would just run like mad in circles. I'm like, what the hell's wrong with this dog? Is this dog got rabies or something? I'm like, what the hell? And it wasn't that. Nobody ever walked the dog. There was very little human contact and interaction. Listen, y'all are horrible when it comes to animals. The poor dog didn't even know how to jump on furniture. I've never seen a house dog in my life that can't jump on furniture. It didn't even know what a sofa was. It was like, oh my God, a sofa. And you see the poor thing trying to jump up, and I'm like, what's wrong with you? Just jump. It had no such life experience. So when we talk about this concept of responsible pet ownership, believe me when I tell you, it's a real concern. Even the DPP's office, they're so ridiculous at times. They were like, well, we know that you intended to steal this dog because you went and got the dog microchipped. And I'm like, what? I said, no, that's actually what responsible pet owners do. You microchip your animals so that if something happens and heaven forbid the animal goes missing, you can actually identify the animals. But you see how we think? Oh no, microchipping is a bad thing. You were trying to steal the dog because you had the dog groomed where, all the excessive hair that was in its ear was removed because the vet said the dog can't hear you because it hasn't been groomed properly in God knows how long. Anyway, I digress, but y'all need to do better with pet ownership, okay? All right. Ensure revenue reaches local councils who enforce cat control regulations. Second, that the cat owners should be required to spay and neuter their cats to reduce the number of unwanted litters and then dumping of stray cats. Most controversially, the report also urged government to mandate nighttime curfews to prevent domesticated cats from leaving their homes after dark. Now, I have to wonder here in Cayman, how many of you all make sure that your cats stay indoors? How many of you have actually gone as far as spaying and neutering your pets, your cat pets, your pet cats, sorry, right? So all of these things are important. Some conservationists hope that the report would actually go further and nighttime curfews would could benefit, they said, nocturnal mammals, but won't save birds and reptiles, which are primarily active during the day. And others in response to the report. So again, I'm going to get this report for you guys. And this is part of the conversation. This link I'll share with you where it says Australia must control its killer cat problem. A major news report explains how, but doesn't go far enough. So the conservationists are like, it explains how, but more needs to be done. Yeah. All right. Some conservationists hope that, yes, I just read that, sorry. From the wildlife perspective, keeping pet cats contained 24/7 is the only responsible option. So pet cats kill about 83 million native reptiles and 80 million native birds in Australia every single year. So cat containment measures even have the support of the Royal Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals. Australia's peak animal welfare organization says that it takes in 65,000 cats every single year, and about 40% of those have to be euthanized. In a 2018 policy document that was cited favorably in the 2021 parliamentary report, this organization agreed that cat containment regulations need to mandate 24-hour containment rather than just nighttime curfews. They said that if they are to significantly reduce wildlife predation, breeding of unwanted cats and a cat nuisance. So listen to this now. This support from the RSPCA stands in contrast to the political situation in the United States of America. They have a study which is published in the Conservation Letters found that while Australia and the US have a similar number of threatened species, the government spending to protect them is more than 15 times higher than in the US. What can we say? There's a lot of areas that the US is not an example of what to do, and this appears to be yet another one. Even so, when it comes to cats, animal welfare and advocacy groups in the US resist proposals by scientists. And, this is unfortunate from a political perspective, but they're resisting proposals by scientists and conservationists to reduce the cat population, and governments at all levels have been reluctant to take on the issue. And trust me, they go on to say that it's a serious matter in the US as it is in Australia, with more than 58 million pet cats and anywhere between 30 and 100 million self-sufficient feral cats that are straying, partially cared for by humans that live in the US. In a 2003 study in the Nature magazine or periodical, found that cats killed as many as 22.3 billion, mostly native mammals in the US on an annual basis. So listen, this is a very in-depth article. It references a lot of supporting documentation to say that this is the solution. Yes, there's an element of the public's reaction to this that one has to take into consideration, but you have an option. You either allow your indigenous animals to go completely extinct in the name of these feral cats roaming around the place, or you do what you can to try to bring the feral cat population under control. The bottom line is this: due to human beings being irresponsible with pet ownership, at all levels, we have allowed this situation to get out of control, my apologies. Is it not now our responsibility to bring it back in control? So let me explain to you guys something that you probably are not aware of, and you probably have not given much thought when you talk about these feral cats, right? Indigenous hunting of cats is a more immediate tool for reducing feral cat numbers. Aboriginal communities, listen very carefully to this, have hunted feral cats for food since at least the 1890s, probably before that, but that's when they probably started to get out of control. So even the Aboriginal communities, before they had all this scientific research, they could see that the feral cats are here, there, and everywhere. So they started hunting them way before you and I were born, by the way. Yeah. And in fact, they were saying that they were becoming a bit of a important part of their diets. Now, I'm not into cat eating, but that's what their Aboriginal communities were doing. So as part of what was at the time the world's largest feral cat eradication project, the New Haven Ranger would track cats on foot in the reserve as her ancestors once tracked kangaroos. And she examined footprints in the sand to determine how recently the cats had passed, followed the tracks, and then kill the cats with a single blow to the head. Well, I mean, there's probably more humane ways of doing it, but folks, this is how the Aboriginals did it. Okay, usually with a heavy iron bar, a single blow to the head. My apologies, not blow to the head. She still hunts feral cats in the unfenced areas of New Haven, and from finding footprints to catching each cat rarely takes Alice longer than an hour. The practice is, however, dying out as more indigenous hunters abandon traditional hunting techniques in favor of vehicle-based hunting with guns, and younger generations of indigenous populations move to the cities. And of course, this is how the indigenous people hunted these feral cats. So it goes on. Obviously, I'm going to show y'all a picture here with this lady who's a member of one of the last nomadic family groups to come out of the desert in 1984. She hunts feral cats to help save populations of threatened species. Man, this cat looks kind of big. I got to be honest with you. But we're going to bring in our guest here in a second. But have a look at this cat. Have a look at this feral cat. And this is her. This is one of the Aboriginal people hunting a feral cat. It's what they have to do. So, on the one hand, we all want to think of cats as cuddly and sweet and we love them and whatever, but we also have to understand the destruction that they're causing. I'm going to share this article because it's quite lengthy. My apologies. And it, does link quite a few different stories here and different research papers that I think is really, really important. Yeah. So in 2019, the Australian Wildlife Conservancy, this one is different, not conservation, but Conservancy. Yeah. Well, that's their name. It says here, notched a major conservation milestone at New Haven when it reintroduced the mala, which is a miniature kangaroo-like marsupial that had become extinct in the wild in the 1980s, to the enclosure. Free to roam without human interference and safe from feral cats, the mala and other reintroduced species are making a remarkable comeback, establishing territories and breeding successfully. Stepping inside the fence area is like stepping back centuries. You've got to watch where you step, says John Kanowski, who's an ecologist and the Australian Wildlife Conservancy's chief scientific officer. A lot of these animals are burrowing or at least dig holes. And so, again, they're able to bring some of these animals back from the brink of extinction. So we do have joining us this morning from the Department of Environment, a representative who, let me just pull up some things here quickly, that we are absolutely tickled to have with us. And we're going to now answer some of your questions in relation to what is happening locally, because it seems to me that there is quite a bit of misinformation that unfortunately is coming out in some of the local discussion. And so we do have a couple sheets here of just accurate information about the alien species regulations. We're going to speak to Mr. John Bothwell, who's the manager of legislation implementation and the coordination unit within the Department of Environment. And he's also the secretary for the National Conservation Council. So I think one of the primary things that we want to do this morning is to correct misinformation that is out and about in the local community. Now, I do see a lot of you have some thoughts on this already. So John, just give me one quick second before we get there. We have Josie says feeding the feral cats like in Puerto Rico. Like I said, a lot of people have this issue. It is not unique to the Cayman Islands. In fact, there was another one, not just the Australia case, but there was an article in the about in the UK as well. I'll see if I can find that one while we're still chatting here this morning, that also talked about the issues with cat culling. So that was a BBC article. Sorry, because again, it is an issue beyond our borders, right? So it continues to be an area of concern for many um, countries. So we have the BBC. This was a 2019 article talking about, should cats be culled to stop extinctions? And again, scientists are calling for a widespread cull of feral cats and dogs, pigs, goats, and rats, and mice to save the endangered species that they prey upon. And this was a BBC article talking about on more than 100 islands, the eradication of more than 100 islands could save some of the rarest animals on Earth, says an international team. Islands, and we are an island, folks. Remember, we're an island. Have seen a 75% of known birds, mammal, amphibian, and reptile extinctions over the past 500 years. And many of these losses are caused by animals introduced by humans. Let me share this so y'all can read up on this one as well. Yeah. So once again, we're the start of the problem. And if anybody has to fix it, it's going to have to be us. So again, these are not natively, not naturally present on islands, and they can threaten native wildlife, the article goes on to say. And eradicating invasive mammals from islands is a powerful way to remove a key threat to island species and prevent extinction and conserve biodiversity, says Dr. Nick Holmes from the group Island Conservation. So in this study, they found that 107 islands where eradication projects could benefit 9.4% of the Earth's threatened island species. Now, 9.4% might not sound like a lot, but trust me, that's just from the island. So that's quite a study, right? And the researchers argue that the likes of feral cats are not of conservation concern, but the species they threaten are often found only in islands where the entire population is at risk of extinction. So they're looking at the Atlantic yellow-nose albatross of the Go Islands. It provides vital nesting habitat, this island, the Go Island, for a number of species, including the Tristan albatross. Lots of birds, right? And so Stuart Butchart, who's a chief scientist at Wildlife International, has said that the action could save extraordinary species that have evolved in isolation and are only found on these remote islands. And some culls have already taken place on some islands, and the world's largest rodent eradication project was recently declared a success, with the UK territory of South Georgia becoming rat-free for the first time in more than 200 years. Oh my God, that's amazing. So, you know, it's feral cats, it's rats, and it's other things, again, have been introduced. So the studies identified 20 belonging to the UK's overseas territories, including Henderson Island in the Pacific, part of the Pitcairn Group, a rat eradication project, the Go Islands, part of the Tristan da Cunha and South Atlantic. They were eradicating anything that was eating seabird, chicks, to save several species from extinction. And so the study goes on, but shows how important it is to remove invasive mammals from islands to prevent further extinction. So I've shared that one in the comment section, and I'll share the Australia one as well. Numerous other stories. So Josie, Miss Morta is here, says, I really love your dress and your nails look nice. Thank you, my dear. It's actually just a top. It's not a dress. Alien species, says KK. Well, that's the terminology that is used, folks, to describe, and we'll see why that terminology is used. But yeah, they're alien because they're not native. Feral cats are not native to the Cayman Islands, despite what y'all think. So Carol makes the same point that the scientists have made, says after spaying and neutering, the cats will still live for years hunting. And yes, that's correct. And that's why there has to be not just spaying and neutering of domestic cats that you somewhat control, but you actually have to do some culling. Listen, we love furry looking things. We love animals, whatever. But to think that we could have a situation where our native species are extinct forever and eradicated from this island would be devastating. You can rest assured that feral cats will never be, even with all the culling in the world, will probably always be one or two in the wild. You know, you let one more out and you have a feral population again. There's no real possibility, I suppose, of them going extinct. And the point is, even if they did, that is not a bad thing. Yeah. Um, Johan is so ridiculous. Johan says feral cats are a nuisance. However, who and which MPs and senior civil servants you put in a blast today? Today is not the day for it, Johan. You gotta stay tuned. But what I want to say is that feral cats are more than just a nuisance. They're a biodiversity, killer. And so that's really, really sad. Tracy says many folks have outdoor cats that would be in jeopardy of being culled. Yes, and that is why it comes down to responsible pet ownership. Keep your pets inside, register them, put a tracker on them. Why are you allowing your outdoor cats to roam and to potentially impact our native birds, reptiles, and so on? Why? You think culling cats is inhumane? Is it not inhumane to allow these cats to also go out there and do what they do, which could be the destruction of our native ecosystem? Which, I mean, to me, it seems like you're asking people to choose here. And forgive me if I choose the one that isn't native and the one that we have introduced into this environment. I'm just saying. Good morning, Miss Barbara. Good morning, Val. So Val talks about the rock iguanas. We'll ask DOE about that. Says that they're eating the booby eggs, and guess who else? The Filipinos. Do you know a delicacy in the Philippines is almost hatched duck eggs? Yeah, but we don't have duck eggs here. And we can certainly ask if that is an area of real concern. But here's the thing, Val. You can actually make that illegal, right? And you can legislate. And I think that's probably what the alien species legislation has done, where no one can go and eat a booby bird, whether you're a feral cat or not. But, as human beings, we can regulate our own behavior, and we can also criminalize that. You can't criminalize something that a feral cat is going to do. And so the rock iguanas and a lot of the iguanas that are not native to this country, again, there was the iguana culling, which has been extremely successful. All right, so let's bring in the local expert now, Mr. John Bothwell. Good morning, John. How are you?
Morning, Sandy. Doing well. Thanks for having me on today.
Yes,
Thank you.
absolutely.
And,
so we've got a lot of questions and comments that are coming in already, but perhaps you can set the stage for why the Department of Environment has had to take this move. I actually understand that this is nothing new, that this is probably 15, 20 years in the workings, that you guys have been talking about this, talking about it. And finally, someone is saying, let's do something about it. Let's change the legislation. So give us the history of how long this has been a concern and what has been done.
Sure. And you're right. This is part of a continuum. This is a next step the nation is taking. Alien species have been a problem for quite a long time. Where people have been talking about that for decades for various things. And if people think of it, remember, dog packs, dog problems had to be addressed. Lionfish is also an alien species that had to be addressed. We got to the green iguanas. There's other species now and in the future that will have to be dealt with, and so that's why the regulations finally came in now. And part of the issue is, or I would suggest that one of the things is, there are the regulations which give us the tools to try and address alien species problems in the wild, or really to not make the situation get any worse. And then there are specific programs to tackle specific species, such as the green iguana cull, which got started a few years ago and remains ongoing. The Department of Environment right now has two particular programs that have caught people's attention. A feral cat and rat culling program around some particularly dense remaining brown booby breeding spots on Cayman Brac, and as well as a separate program on Little Cayman. And then, of course, we also have the new regulations, which we want to make sure everybody are aware of and aware of how they work. So we've got sort of three issues that all relate to each other and are happening at the same time. But the fact that they're happening now is simply because in some cases these have been going on for quite a while, or this is a next step, continuing work that's already started. The animals law covered dog controls back from probably the 1970s, I think, and these regulations are just continuing that and a tool to address current but particularly future alien species control needs.
So we have one point that we'll go into the legislation here in a little bit, but we have one point that keeps coming up from people who are saying, this isn't necessary. Because if you feed the feral cats, then that, eliminates the issue. I have seen from the research here that doesn't actually eliminate the issue at all, because cats are hunters and they just like to hunt for the sport of hunting. What has DOE's research found in relation to this?
So not saying we're directly researching, because as you say, this is proven around the world, and anybody who has a well-fed fat pet cat and watches it long enough will pretty much agree with this, that cats do not lose their hunting desire, not just an instinct. No matter how well-fed and teamed the house cat is, it's still going to hunt stuff. And obviously, the more they're out in the wild and the more feral they are, the more they're going to be hunting. We do, obviously, again, the more something is fed, the less interested it is in hunting at certain times, but that doesn't completely remove its desire to hunt in the case of cats. And that's just, that's just the way it is. One of the interesting things about some of the cat research in other places is they've found that cats obviously aren't always motivated by food. There will be times when they will walk right past a pile of food because they're not hungry right that minute. So just because we're not seeing a well-fed cat hunting all the time, I mean, my cat doesn't sit down right next to his food bowl, for example, but we do know that these cats will hunt no matter how well-fed they are, and that's just the way cats are. And the real problem, of course, is the feral animals out in the wild living off of native species. That's the biggest problem. We are not, I don't want to say we're not interested in, house cats, but that's kind of what it is. Your pet cat is not what these regulations are about. These are not pet regulations. These are alien species regulations for the control of alien species and feral species in the wild.
Now, here's a bit of interesting did you know fact about cats that helps us to put some of this into perspective. And I'm going to again share this article because I won't read the whole thing. This is from an international cat care organization. Question: why do domestic cats hunt prey? And they remind us that, like their wild ancestors, my apologies, domestic cats are specialized solitary hunters. And up until fairly recent times, cats were primarily kept as pest controllers rather than companions. So while y'all love your little furry cats and you're hugging them up and whatever, it was not that long ago that the reason that they were brought into cities and even into our homes were to be pest controllers. It's not that people particularly cared for cats, but they were very good at what they do, which is hunting things like rodents and so on. And that's why they were useful. At this point, only the best hunters were able to survive and reproduce. Isn't that interesting? Meaning that our pet cats today are descended from the most adept hunters. And as we have done very little selective breeding of cats in comparison, for example, with dogs, right, and generally exert little control over their breeding, the instinctive need to perform hunting behavior remains very strong. Cats are referred to as obligate carnivores, which means that they need to eat meat to survive and fulfill their specific and unique nutritional requirements. And as they hunt alone, their prey tends to be small in size, as this is all they're capable of catching on their own. And the most common prey for cats is small birds and, small mammals and birds. And some cats have actually been skilled enough to catch prey such as rabbits and so on. So I'm going to share this for those of you who think that you're experts on why feeding cats is still a good idea, and that you believe that you can remove thousands of years worth of instincts within cats just because you're going to give them some kitty litter or whatever it is that you're feeding. Not kitty litter. What do you feed cats? Cat food, whatever. That you think that that's going to do it. Folks, this is where, again, I encourage people to try to educate yourselves as much as possible. I love cats. I think they're so cute and they're so cuddly and whatever. I'm not a cat expert. When it comes to understanding their behavior, I try to educate myself and learn. I'm not here as an expert, but every single expert that's out there is saying that feeding cats does not, remove their instinct to actually want to continue hunting. That's what they do. And I'm sure that a lot of you have even seen it within your homes where you've got a little lizard inside the house, or you've got an insect or whatever. Next thing you know, you see your cat doing this. Let's give you an example, right, of how they get down in that crouching hunting position, and they're going to be jumping on whatever they can find in your house. So even within your house, they will help you to keep your house insect free, because again, no matter how much you feed them, that hunting instinct is still there, and that is precisely what they do. Trying to just get this little picture uploaded, but this is them crouched down, looking at the little. I don't know what that is in this picture here, but this is what they do. So they locate prey, they circle it, they stalk it. You see them get down in the stalking positions, and it's not motivated by necessarily by hunger, right? It's a bit of a sport for them. It's part of who they are innately as a species, and we have to accept that it is what it is. So, John, this has been in the works for quite some time. Why do you think that people feel like this is something that's new? Everybody's like, oh my God, where did this legislation come out from? Val says kitty litter. Yeah, I didn't mean kitty litter.
Probably two reasons. Because when it is, it just got passed in November, December last year and coming into force this year. And so it's time to talk about the actual legislation. We've all talked around and around in circles about alien species issues and problems with invasive species. And remember, this is from the Department of Environment's perspective. We're worried about native species and the problems that alien species can cause from them. That's our primary concern. And so this was us putting in, doing our part regarding our corner of this problem, getting these regulations passed to allow us to carry out or continue this work and to try and tighten down on some other issues, because another half of these regulations is all about prohibited species, those species that are just so problematic we don't want to take the risk of them coming into the country. If you think of the boa constrictors in the Everglades, to get an idea of the kind of thing that we're thinking about and worried about. Obviously, cats is a very warm and fuzzy issue for a lot of people. But these regulations, again, it's not about pet ownership. This is about, stopping some of the worst potential problems from coming in and getting started, or giving us the tools necessary to address the ones that we do have here now, potentially. Yeah.
Now,
sorry, go on.
Yes, I was just going to ask a quick question. Has there been any consideration, because as we can see in the Australian context, there is a real desire to have pet owners who have domesticated cats to also be responsible. So have we gone that far where we're saying let's register cats and so on as well?
Department of Environment, this is unfortunate. This is not our issue, and I hate to say it that way because it's a stock government answer. But we are primarily concerned with the native species out in the wild. The arguments that would be an important thing for a country to do. I think are very, very strong arguments. Everyone can agree that. And I'm sure we're all looking forward to probably some combination of government and the private sector really getting some good, responsible pet ownership protocols and even regulations in place.
Mm-hmm.
What they would look like from our native species side, you know, not a topic we're necessarily the right people to be talking about. There are a lot of people in this country who have done a lot more thinking and discussing about what responsible pet ownership looks like than we have, and we would defer to them. The Department of Agriculture has looked at this, a bit from what their side, what needs to be changed on their side. I'm quite sure from discussions that some of the other private sector groups have thought and talked about what this would look like.
Mm-hmm.
We would defer to them completely. And I think, obviously everybody I think would probably agree that good pet ownership, responsible pet ownership is important of itself. And of
Mm-hmm.
course, we would love it because it would reduce the amount of new animals coming in and going feral. It's why we had to put in the prohibited species list in these alien species regulations, because there are people who love all kind of weird pets, and sometimes these pets escape or are released or however they get out into the wild and become a feral problem that we don't want new ones. We've already got quite enough as it is.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Can we accept as a perhaps constructive criticism here
Mhm.
that when we're introducing any sort of legislation, I know this probably doesn't necessarily fall squarely on you, but you do have a position within the Department of Environment
Mhm.
where you work with, I guess, legislation, and you're the manager of legislation implementation and coordination unit at the
Yes.
Department of Environment. That even if something has been in the works for eons, so even if it's something that we've been talking about for the past 15 years, just like the national ID, that when you get to the point where you're actually going to finally do something about it, because as you know, typical government, 20 years for anything to come to fruition. That even though it's been talked about off and on for years and legislation might have been drafted for the past 5 years or 2 years or whatever, that there has to be more of a public educational process leading up to the passage of legislation, because then otherwise it seems to me that human beings always have a sense, whether it's actually true or not, in their minds they're always blindsided by what they see as legislative changes. I mean, the people who are talking about this, you would swear that there's never been a discussion on feral cats, that it hasn't been a long-standing conversation, and that the government just came up with this overnight on a whim last year, October, November. So
Yeah.
there has to be more education. I know you guys have a really handy 9-page pamphlet here, which I'm going to show on the screen. But generally speaking, there has to be more education leading up to these types of things.
That's we absolutely take that criticism on board. No problems there. And it's a really interesting one. You're right, because about a year ago or so, we had a big push in our public outreach regarding alien invasive species, particularly including feral cats, that put a lot of information out there to the public. So there was a lot of discussion, but didn't get quite the same attention of people because there was no regulation behind it.
Mm-hmm.
Now that we've got the regulation, it's like everybody was suddenly discovered that we cared about alien species in the wild.
Right.
And so, bad example, bad phrase is chicken and egg situation. We have been talking about alien species for many years and the problems they have. We've even talked, as I said, specifically about feral cats and the problems with them. And so basically, almost all of the issues people are talking about now are things we've talked about before, sometimes over the course of many years. But now that there's suddenly a regulation to deal with it, and it doesn't even deal with most of the problems that are still there, just deals with Department of Environment side of things. People suddenly seem surprised by it. One of the things that we do is, and these regs are a good example of it, the sort of day one when it's passed, things, while they may be enforced, there's always going to be an education period following it. And these regs actually have built in a 3-month and a 6-month period for certain parts of it where they don't come into force until 3 months or 6 months has passed, precisely for this reason. So we completely hear the criticism. You know, we know that everybody feels very surprised by this stuff every time it comes in, and we do our best to talk about issues beforehand. One of the things that, and again, speaking kind of generally here for other, for government, is until the regulation itself is passed, sometimes we cannot necessarily talk about the exact fine details, except of what's going to be passed, because we're gathering people's opinions on it, and then what comes out comes out. The marine parks might be a good example of this from our department, where they went through several rounds of public consultation, public discussion, and it got to the point where we were basically flipping one or two zones almost back and forth, depending on each time it went out. The same people had the same issues with it, and so sometimes you just have to pick a solution that is the best compromise you can get in that case.
Right.
So it is oftentimes almost not about the public discussion, because we love that and we try to do it as much as we can, but sometimes we can't have the real nitty-gritty discussion with the public until there is a reg to deal with, or we've taken everybody's discussion and that feeds into the regulation, which is what happened here as well in this case. So we've talked about these issues for quite a while to produce the regulations, and now we have a follow-up public education period to make sure that people know what the rules are and how they work. And in the case of these regs, but a lot of other things, it's very much about trying to move public perception and discourse on what is acceptable and unacceptable. Because obviously, if 100% of the people do not obey a law, it's useless. It's kind of like the speed limit laws, for to use perhaps another bad example. If 99.9% of us weren't all doing the speed limit, those regs wouldn't work.
Right.
And so the public education outreach, it almost like it really ramps up once regulations are in hand, because now we all know what the rules are, and we can start really talking about what they mean and the adaptations that individuals in the country then have to do to make this next step in a better Cayman. In this case, it is no longer releasing and supporting alien species in the wild. People will talk, we've heard sometimes people saying that these new regs mean they can no longer spay and neuter pet animals. Obviously not. That's absolutely not what it means. This is not pet animal regulation. Please do spay and neuter your pets. I hope we can all agree on that. They say that a first basic step is responsible pet ownership. As much as I say these regs are not about pets, that FAQ you have up there, which I think on our website now there's a version 2 up that's up to about 14 pages. But that's been on there since late last year, the first version of it. They all look the same, unfortunately. And the last 2 pages is tips for keeping your pet, cat and dogs safe. And it's about being responsible, keeping them properly contained running on the road, keeping them identified so that if they do get loose, your neighbors can help return them to you. And please spay and neuter your pets. First part of there not being a continuing problem right there.
Let me see if I can find the latest version of that document. But
that's okay. It's gonna look the same for your audience, and if they just go to doe.ky, the link to all of this is going to be right down the bottom of that homepage.
All right, let me see here. Download FAQ, and then it says, I think this is it. Yes. Okay. That one is still 9 pages. I wonder if it's
okay. Then we're gonna have to update a link somewhere, but yes, it's growing. It is growing.
All right. So
maybe they about it down to 9 pages for us.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So what we're looking at here, folks, again, is trying to educate people really around this issue. We understand that it's an emotive issue. I think comments like Jonathan's probably does not help very much, where he's saying just do it because probably only 10 old ladies with cats. This concept of only old single women have a cat fetish and really love protecting cats is ridiculous, Jonathan. And we want to encourage you to be respectful to people who love cats and who are probably feeling very, very emotional about this. But we have a need to remove the emotion and look at the science-based research and evidence that's out there. And the destructive nature of feral cats is no less destructive than, as Mr. John Bothwell pointed out, the lion fish that are in our oceans and other invasive species that can quickly take over an ecosystem. Our feelings around cats, whether domesticated or feral cats, is something that in human interaction is a relatively newer situation, but we know how much we love our animals, and it would be so wonderful if everybody was a responsible pet owner, but that is something that we struggle with on a regular basis. And so part of the struggle is trying to properly educate people. So the National Conservation Act 2013 and the National Conservation Alien Species Regulations 2022 provides several important legal definitions that is going to help the government to better control the potential negative impact of alien species on our sensitive ecosystem. So this legislation is not just about, oh, let's just run out there and start culling feral cats. It's also about properly defining what a native species is, what an alien species is, and what an invasive species is. So, John, tell us a little bit about the distinction between these three, and then we'll get to the feral species and prohibited species as well.
Sure. So, alien species just means any species that's not naturally from that area. The lionfish not naturally being a Caribbean species, it's an alien species, as opposed to your native species there. The invasive species is actually a much looser definition, and not one that we've actually put into the regulations for that reason. It's basically an alien species that is becoming a problem, usually because of some condition of their life history and because they're in a place where they're not native to. So the lionfish are a good example. For whatever reason, their prey animals here, their prey fish, don't necessarily even recognize them as predators. They did some really interesting experiments when lionfish started showing up in the Caribbean. You get an aquarium, you put a small fish into it with, say, a grouper, a young grouper, and they'd kind of go on either side of either corner of the aquarium, because the smaller fish recognize this is a predator, I need to stay away from it. You put the lionfish in there instead, and the little blenny, whatever they were using, would eventually just kind of walk right up to the lionfish and get very, very quickly and easily eaten. These are animals that, because they've evolved somewhere with a different type and higher predator pressures, they reproduce very heavily. The green iguanas would be an example of that compared to, say, our rock iguanas. Central America, large predatory cats being an issue for them, as well as large predatory snakes. But particularly some of the bigger cats over there, they produce a lot, and they'll go straight up, and they're much more active up trees, swimming across water and stuff to get away from predators. Here in the Cayman Islands, that lack of, they're not having those predators to keep them in check, and their production just going crazy compared to our native species. But as I say, trying to put all that into legal language, it doesn't really work. And then you got to take into account the other impacts that some of these alien species will have. So right now, people may have seen us talking about the Brazilian pepper, which is a very pretty tree. It can be used at times in landscaping, but it's also very, very toxic and noxious, particularly to people. So even if it's not reproducing super quickly, because it's so noxious, you don't want it here. We don't want it around people if we can get rid of it. So we're having to try and educate people about that. And when it's found on Grand Cayman or Little Cayman we remove it, and that involves us, I think, spraying it with some very nasty chemicals to try and kill it down to the roots, but not without giving it a chance to spread seed or spring back up in the roots, or we can't even burn it because that puts off noxious smoke.
Wow.
So there's a variety of things going into becoming an invasive species. That's why we didn't try to define that in the regulations. And because the law itself used the phrase alien species, we stuck with that.
Mm-hmm.
What we put into the regulations is feral specimens or feral species
Mm-hmm.
and the wild. And this is just the idea that if a species of an animal or a plant is somewhere it's not supposed to be,
Mm-hmm.
particularly out beyond your control, it becomes a feral species in the wild. So
Mm-hmm.
if anybody has seen the good old boy YouTube videos of people hunting feral hogs in the southern United States, this is going to be a really good example of what we're concerned about ever happening here. Is these animals, which in a farm may be completely fine, but if they're allowed to get out and run wild and become feral, they become a significant problem.
Mm-hmm.
It's not even this. So it's not that saying pigs are an alien or an invasive species. They can be an invasive species if they get loose, and they become a problem around the world. And so this is why we went with the idea of a feral specimen or a feral species in the wild, because that's the problem that the DOE is trying to avoid or trying to deal with, depending on the species involved.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So we have, again, folks, we're happy to put this document up for all of you to go through it and to view it. Dominique saying, what about being informed beforehand, before legislation? So to his point, I think there could be a general consensus that not just in relation to this, but probably all, laws that are either updated or passed, or when regulations are about to be passed, there's a general sense that there's simply not enough information. And the sad thing is there's been so much misinformation that has been put into the public's sort of sphere now, is that it's hard to go back and try to correct some of that, because there's something about repetitive misinformation, and the more you repeat something that's untrue, the more people believe it. And so then the real accurate information has to try to catch up with that misinformation. And that is from a public relations and just knowledge perspective, that is a very, very difficult thing to have to do. So when it says here, are my pets going to be affected by the new regulations? This is one of the FAQ sections. And it talks about domestic mammals such as cats, dogs, hamsters, and rabbits are exempt under the new regulation. It's important to ensure that your pets do not become invasive or feral by practicing responsible pet ownership. So it's entirely possible for people to have initially a domesticated pet that they just allow to roam freely and to go out and about as it wishes. And it starts to take on these sort of feral instincts and, definition, if you will. So of course, that is something that one should, try your best as a responsible pet ownership to comply with all of the relevant legislation, not just the new regulations, but also the Animals Act 2015 revision.
Yeah.
And
yeah. If I can just jump in there, that's a good point to make about these regs, as I said, covering almost two different things. Your pet hamster in its cage, DOE has nothing to do with that, yeah. But why we worded that, because if you've got one of the prohibited species, say you happen to have a pet boa constrictor in your house, this is when, under these new regs, that is illegal and you need a permit for it, because these are the species that are in the pet trade around the world, but that we're very worried about coming in here and what could happen here if they were brought in and then got loose and went feral. And anybody, so as I said, there's people are going to be talking about these regulations for a long time to come, because that part of those regs don't kick in for 6 months. I want to say it's something like in May or something that that part really comes into force, because we recognize that people did have these animals or plants, but really it's animals as pets, that they would need some time to regularize them or work with us to see how do we address the animals that they do have, and not just work with us, work with the Department of Agriculture on whether or not these animals, because they'll have some say into it since they regulate the import of plants and animals, as not as well. They do, full stop.
Mm-hmm.
So it how you had the boa constrictor that's your pet there is one of those questions that we need to get asked before it gets sorted out. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So we have people can, again, I think the registration of cats has got to be something at some point that is going to have to be put on the table, just like how you register your dogs. I think that's probably a really good idea.
Yeah.
So is there anything prohibiting you? It's not required by law, but is there anything that prohibits you from getting your cats registered? Like, is somebody, Department of Environment or someone, keeping a cat registration database?
So I think no, there's nothing prohibiting it getting registered somewhere, but I think the problem is that no one is keeping such a database. Department of Environment, when we have done specific programs, we have gone out. So like we're doing a little Cayman, or the one spot in the BRAC where we're working is kind of close to some people. We've gone out to those neighborhoods and said, please, can we register your cat so that if we find it, we can return it to you. But obviously, it's not. We're not the right agency for that on a national scale. This then comes back to talking about what proper pet ownership and proper pet owner regulation looks like in the country, and who to do it, how to do it. A really fun discussion to have, possibly on a show like yours, but with a number of the parties who will be most closely dealing with that. Department of Agriculture, obviously, but you could see a role for that perhaps in an NGO type thing, type group, if there was an interest in doing it that way. There's I'm sure different ways it could all be done to set up that third party, so that any pet that gets lost can be tracked back to its owner.
Right. Because as it sits now, if that doesn't exist for cats in particular, if a cat is found sort of to be roaming, what happens? I guess some animal rescue group will just take control of the cat. If it's not microchipped, then if someone doesn't put out I'm looking for my cat, then chances are it's probably going to eventually be put down.
Quite possibly, yes. I don't think that animal charters here might do that in their defense, or to speak for them. But yes, that can absolutely, you can see that happening in the future, depending on what the future pet ownership regs come into force. So I would, to add to the please spay and neuter your pets, is please tag them as responsible pet ownership right now, because even if it means whoever has found them having to make a couple of calls around to the different vets to say, do you have this number in your database? I believe that's probably what the charities do now. But they can only do that, as you said, if it's a responsible pet owner who has made their pet identifiable to them. And the little microchips are really small and shouldn't be any problem for almost any, at least any pet mammal to have and to be able to handle.
Right. So just to be clear, folks, the native wildlife population that is most at risk because of the alien species, which includes cats that are in abundance, includes the Sister Island rock iguanas, the brown, is it boobies? Is that the correct word?
Yes, the boobies.
Boobies. We've got the blue iguanas and other native nesting seabirds that have populations that are at risk, again, from the local and international extinction. So, I was mentioning earlier in the BBC article, some of the overseas territories, there's a real concern, especially for islands, because islands tend to have native species that are very, very unique because they're not connected to another landmass. You won't find that they've migrated anywhere else. A lot of times they can't swim across vast, ocean bodies and so forth. So we've, over the years, even on our sister islands and here in the Cayman Islands, we have found species that are very unique to the Cayman Islands and cannot be found anywhere else in the world. In your opinion, John, how important is it to try to protect those species from extinction?
Yeah. Obviously, I'm going to say I think it's very important. This is a sort of a bit of a moral imperative on us.
Mm-hmm.
It's also about preserving our uniquely Caymanian identity.
Mm-hmm.
Whether that's the blue iguana or the sister islands rock iguanas and the other two islands, this is how we kind of identify ourselves. The brown boobies that we're working with, particularly right now, again, part of what we think about as Cayman are these seabirds that used to be plentiful around our islands, not so much anymore in relation to several of the species. And something else you said there earlier that was also very important is this is not just an alien species issue. There's a lot of problems for many of these species. People will probably hopefully remember last year we were doing a parcel of outreach regarding our seabird conservation plan, because a lot of these species need, there's a number of issues that we have to deal with regarding them, and trying to put that in an organized manner, put it out to the public so that the public knows what is going on before any new regulations or rules for particular species come into force, or come into effect. I shouldn't even say it, come into force, come into effect.
Mm-hmm.
And recognizing that it's a package of education, as well as conservation initiatives, plus research that goes with it to see what we need to do and what's working, what's not as it goes along. So yeah, it's really important that we save these species because they are us.
Mm-hmm.
Cayman without our natural abundance of native and even endemic species is not the same place. And as you said,
Mm-hmm.
sometimes this is hard to notice. The ching-ching that is everywhere in Grand Cayman, also they're on Little Cayman as well, are actually two different subspecies. So even something that looks very common might be uniquely Cayman. Or the flip side is the brown boobies. They're a part of a pan-tropical species. You can find them lots of other places. They're not endangered internationally, but our local breeding population, and right now, and they only breed on the brack right now, is in danger of being lost locally. And so, to say it horribly, if Cayman loses something, if Cayman is lost, is that a loss to the world? Maybe not, but it's a loss to us. This is our home, and those boobies, those iguanas, are part of us as much as we are, a part of this country. So that's what we're trying to save them.
Mm-hmm. All right. So, of course, this legislation talks about importing prohibited species into the Cayman Islands, which is now illegal to import any plant or animal listed on the prohibited species list. Currently in the Cayman Islands, any prohibited species currently in the Cayman Islands which remain here under permit, are not allowed to reproduce. Jonathan makes the point that he's surprised as to why anyone would want a boa constrictor as a pet. Luis, this question keeps coming up about not just the feral cats, but what about chickens who might not pose quite the same risk to the birds, but they do pose a risk nonetheless. Is there any consideration about what can possibly be done with them?
So good question. I don't want to say that there is, to the best of my knowledge, there is no active program consideration right now. That's not to say that people within government, and I assume outside of government as well, have not talked about it and thought about it for years on and off, and that is not people. I know some people within government right now who are thinking about it and saying, yeah, this needs to be addressed sort of by somebody, but how you do it, what that might look like, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, is why I'm saying I don't want anybody to think that there's a plan coming. It is the kind of thing, though, that if members of the public or organized groups wanted to start talking about, yes, what would that look like? And again, from the Department of Environment perspective, we're worried about the native species. It might be that proper management of something like chickens, which are basically escaped food animals,
Mm-hmm.
addressed from a different angle and a different direction of what is the best way to make, to wildly reduce their numbers in the wild, yes, please. But what do you do with them? What's the best way to do with that for people
Right.
to, perhaps to use them, find ways to use them, what that looks like. Yeah. But then you're going to have to start talking about what does responsible backyard chicken ownership look like,
Right.
which is not something our grandparents ever had to worry about, but which these days, if you wanted to get a significant number of these chickens into backyard agriculture, as an example,
Mm-hmm.
we need to talk about what that looks like and make sure the public are all on board and agreeing on what that means and what that should be. But yes, please, anybody want to start that initiative to get them out of the wild, you have our full support. Yes, please. Yeah.
All right. So Vicky also is talking about, please, chickens, please. Weeby says, what about the chickens? Miss
Yeah.
Brenda says that we need to do something about all the wild cats and chickens. Please tell us if you're going to address the problem with the chickens. So Miss Brenda, not yet. And of course, again, this is where government might need to do some forward thinking as it relates to that particular issue, because they are out of control. I mean, we're trying to do backyard gardening.
Yes.
At my house, and my poor husband, he's actually put up like fencing to keep the chickens out. And I'm like, you do know chickens fly, right? They will fly over if need be, but they dig up every time you try to plant a plant or any kind of anything, a seed of any sort, they'll go and dig it up. And so they can be a real nuisance. But someone pointed out, I think that was Luis, he said, send them to Cuba. And with the increasing cost of eggs, maybe there's more of a market now for the chickens to be integrated in some sort of proper farming situation. But of course, all of those things take money and require someone to be well organized from a business perspective. So Leslie, sorry, go ahead, John.
I would say that business perspective is also a very big part of it, because we ran into this a bit when we we're looking at the green iguanas, that what may be a socially responsible thing to do, put them all into farming somewhere, may not be the most cost-effective way of means of animal control. So again, why this is not necessarily a DOE issue is because, like the chickens in particular, nationally we want to find some other approach to them that isn't, the government way of what's the cheapest, most effective way of dealing with the problem. Yeah.
So Leslie says that she's very disappointed that you did not present the other side, Sandra. Not a mention of TVNR. Well, most of us would have no idea what TVNR is. So I did have to inquire about that. That is trap, vaccinate, neuter, and release. And of course, we have addressed it. Leslie, had you been listening from the onset, you would have heard us talk about the context even of the Australia studies and the numerous studies that have been done all over the world. The bottom line is, it would take a significant amount of time to get the feral population under control, even if you're doing it in that method. I don't know what the average lifespan is for cat in the wild, but I would think that since they have no natural predators, they're going to live to be quite old.
Actually, no. So if I can interrupt.
Yes.
In the wild, unfortunately, they have a fairly short lifespan normally, because they're living such hard, horrible lives. So the program we have in Little Cayman, one of the things that they're doing is, with the vet, trying to estimate the age of the animals they're catching and looking at what are they eating and stuff. And basically, in some of them or many of them, they're eating garbage. A lot of times they're living off of human waste refuse, because that's easy to get hold of. They're also get quite sick. A lot of intestinal worms and other nastiness like that. Your pet cat, because you're taking good care of it as a responsible pet owner, doesn't have to worry about. So although these cats can start breeding from something like 4 months old or someplace, someone saying the other day, they're only living a few years in the wild. So yes, you're absolutely right that they do get to reproduce quite good, but they're not living great lives. And the problem is the release part. Our native wildlife, wild can no longer accept release of these animals. If people want to do trap, vaccine, neuter, rehome, yes, please do keep that going. Your own pets, vaccinate them, yes, but please spay and neuter your pets. Keep control of them. What we cannot no longer support is release of alien species into the wild to go feral, whether it was pet dogs, pet green iguanas, whether it's cats or chickens. We can't take any more of them in the wild, and the release just adds to that problem.
Yes.
Or at the very least, continues the problem unnecessarily.
And to Leslie's question, again, the research is quite strong to show that there's decades of evidence, including camera imagery, puncture wounds, is that feces? Fur clearly identifying that cat predation on threatened native wildlife continues. And so this concept of trapping, neutering, and releasing them is not a solution that has been found to be viable anywhere in the world. And again, I would challenge you to demonstrate, Leslie, where in the world that particular method has worked. Australia, it hasn't worked for them. They have been cat calling, and they said that, it's worked so effectively in a particular contained area and bringing species from the brink. And in one case, really, there was none left in the wild. So that was extinct in the wild, bringing these species back, that now they're looking to expand that beyond just that particular area and see how far they can go with it. The US and other areas as well, realizing that the trap, neuter, and release program simply does not work, because even if that cat is only going to live a couple of years in the wild, the destruction that they can do, the number of native species that they can kill within that short period of time can be very, very devastating. So it doesn't stop their hunting instincts, unfortunately. The other point that someone made is that using this trap, neuter, and release program, adds reintroduces the cat once they're released into the population, and the TNR efforts, you can't keep up. So in other words, you can't trap, neuter, and release quick enough compared to how quickly they breed and so on. Some misinformation about the new regulations. So no one is going to get arrested or going to jail on February the 3rd. So the regulations come into force on February the 3rd?
The parts of them, and this is the part about supporting feral animals in the wild. So basically feeding the wild cats, feeding the wild chickens, that kind of thing. This is what kicks in. It comes into force on February 3rd. But we're not going to be setting up a sting operation, down at one of the spots, down at Liar's Tree, where they're feeding the chickens, kind of thing. This is going to be, again, weeks, months, years of public outreach and education on why this is a problem. The regulations are here for a host of reasons, including to support that public education, because obviously previously telling people, this isn't a good idea, wasn't enough. We were having to take the next step and ramping up that public education to now include, and by the way, it's also against the law. Obviously I think we can all imagine future scenarios where several warnings have gone through before anybody gets charged with sort of willful disobedience under the law, continue to cause problems. We really, really hope it never gets to that. But this is just there to make that line that this is no longer acceptable. We cannot be supporting feral animals in the wild, because that's just making the problem worse, or continuing the problem at the very least.
So I'm going to put the link here if you guys would like to see an FAQ on the Alien Species Regulations 2022. That's the updated link. So by all means, have a look at that, and frame any questions that you may have in relation to the regulations. Oops, let me just increase the size here so everyone can actually see it on screen as well. So nobody's going to be showing up at my house on the 3rd of February to arrest me in relation to the regulations.
No, and we're definitely
Is
going to
anyone
put
going to
this
be
out.
coming to my yard to take my pets away if I have, a cat in my yard once they're within my legal boundaries?
Short answer, no. Again, what this regs are about is feral species specimens, feral animals and plants out in the wild.
Yes.
Your pet cat is your responsibility to be a responsible pet owner with it. Same thing with your pet dog and stuff. And so, again, this isn't a pet regulation. Please be very responsible with your animals, which means keeping control of them, spay and neuter them, make sure they're tagged so that people return them to you when they do happen to if they do happen to get out of your yard. That's just the right thing to do, I would suggest. And yeah, please do that. But these regulations are not about trying to regulate your dog and stuff, or your pet, or your much less your pet cat. But they are still your responsibility to be responsible for.
Right.
And that is important for people to remember, because we do get some of these pet cats that are roaming quite far, which is why we're pushing, please be responsible with your animal. Keep them contained to your yard. Your animal in your yard is not a problem for anyone else, but an animal out in the wild starting to go feral is causing problems for the native species.
Someone says that you wouldn't expect for cows, goats to be allowed to trample around in private yards. So why do you think that it's okay for cats to do so? And that, people need to start thinking about the fact that these are unowned animals that are in the wild and really have no one to care for them. So the animals are also being made to suffer unnecessarily because they don't have proper care. And as you said, it's horrible to hear that they're actually eating mostly through garbage. So for every person that thinks that they're putting out a little bowl of cat food and they're feeding 1 or 2 feral cats, there are probably dozens more by comparison per one that's being fed that isn't being fed and is having to sort of forage for itself and is living under really horrible conditions. And if you really cared for cats, you should not want that population to continue to grow, even for that reason alone.
Yep, that's absolutely true.
Yep. So very, very sad. So again, to Leslie's point about TNR, again, that's trap, neuter, and release. We have a note here that it only works under highly restricted circumstances. It requires an incredible amount of labor, and it relies on a very specific set of conditions, including small, fewer than 50 animals, closed populations undergoing aggressive trap and neuter and rehome, and the feral cat population in the Cayman Islands is considered ineligible for TNR because it is simply far too big. And new animals are added to the population by the reproduction, which starts as young as 4 months, which is much faster than any TNR efforts could possibly keep up with. Oh, so sad.
Yeah. And I'd like to encourage everybody to please go to the DOE website, download, check this out yourself. Also, if you do a search on our website for invasive species, we have a web page up there on invasive species. We've had it up there for several years now, covering a host of the species, but also in that there is a link to a document we put together back in 2021 and put out in 2021 about a feral cat FAQ. And all of these documents have references, so you can go out and back check and look at the actual research papers yourself, because there's a lot of information out there about trap, neuter, release, and the conditions under which, how much do you have to, even in a TNR program, remove the cats from the population to make it effective at reducing the population. Obviously, a lot of these TNR programs in other places, and even here locally, will try and work with a rehoming component, taking cats, getting them into good homes. And that's no problem. That's great, because that removes them from the wild. But unless you've got a very small, very closed population, or you're doing a high degree of rehoming, basically the wild population just keeps increasing, because the cats you're not getting to, the cats you can't get to, just kind of keep replacing the ones that you do manage to take out, or to reduce their breeding fecundity. So very much cats in the wild in some places like the Cayman Islands are probably at about carrying capacity. And so you trap, neuter, release a few. All you've done is put a few cats back into the wild. You haven't really reduced the wild number out there, unfortunately.
All right. So here's a few things to consider about feeding under the headline of feeding. So, of course, feeding your animals in your property is still allowed. Feeding cats does not prevent them from roaming and hunting. Neutering cats does not prevent them from roaming and hunting. Feeding animals in the wild actually gives them energy to breed more and hunt in the wild. And hunting is an innate instinct for cats, and they hunt whether they are fed or neutered or not. Again, I think we've covered that extensively this morning. There are no pet owner regulations. So responsible pet ownership is something the Department of Environment wholeheartedly supports, but it's a separate issue. So that isn't really being addressed in these regulations. So that's outside of their remit. And again, they're focusing on the protection of native species as they continue to advocate for people to be responsible. Keep it safe and keep it under your control. Do spay and neuter your own pets, and make sure that it can be easily identified if it escapes by microchipping your pet. So native species evolved in the Cayman Islands before people arrived. Again, let's be very, very conscious of how that has worked, folks, and developed instincts over thousands of years based on the threats around them. And the young Cayman iguanas do not instinctively recognize cats and dogs as a threat, for example. The black brown booby bird is protected under the National Conservation Act. And the colony on Cayman Brac has been there for hundreds of years and is part of our culture and heritage. And there used to be thousands of these birds and nests covering all over the bluff face and edge, all along the Lighthouse Trail. Now we're down to less than 50 nesting pairs. I mean, that's shocking and really, really sad. And of course, that is why when people ask the question, well, why all of a sudden is this important? It's not that it's all of a sudden, it's that it's now at a critical stage where we have less than 50, pairs left that are actually breeding. And that's on the verge of extinction, no matter how you slice it.
That's right. And this is what we're talking about, sort of local extirpation, local extinction versus, globally. And this is why we had to act this year to try and help save this year's breeding season for these birds, is because it's just got to the point where, it is a critical issue, or these animals are at a critical point. Absolutely.
Yeah. So Richard says, stop destroying the animal's habitat. This might help. Well, to be clear, a perfect example when we were talking about the brown booby birds, no one is interrupting their habitat at all on the bluff. Am I correct?
So you're both right, if I can give that answer. So the very top of the bluff, where we are working right now, nobody is developing that area. This is not a habitat loss problem up there. Obviously, boobies on the Brac and around the world, but let's just stick with Cayman Brac, are experiencing habitat loss due to they're experiencing habitat loss for a variety of reasons. Development, yes, being one of the major ones, and that is having a problem. Absolutely, no doubt about it. One of the things we've seen is the boobies that are nesting sort of on the south coast of the Brac. Over the years, we've had the reports of them sometimes previously nesting sort of on the face of the bluff, and now they've moved down onto the flat kind of cobbled beaches, perhaps because of disturbance of that bluff face habitat. But people kind of moving in above and below them, they've moved down closer to the water, trying to find some place where they can successfully nest and feel safe. Of course, we all love beaches too, so that's not necessarily a great place for them either, or a place that will not be under threat of human disturbance. Also under threat of disturbance from people's animals, whether those are pets running loose or feral animals. So I don't want to I don't think we can diminish the threat that the multiple threats these seabirds are under. As I said, we have a draft species conservation plan that speaks to that and to all of those different things. But you're also right, Sandy, that up on the very top of the bluff where we are currently doing trapping, cat and rat trapping operation, there's no development up there. So it's both people are both sides are right in this one.
Dion says the radio is going off. Okay, not sure. I'll speak to Chuck about that. Miss Brenda says the goal is to reduce the problem. How does releasing them back into people's communities solve the problem? Miss Wanda is asking a question. If one was going to get arrested, who's arresting officers? Is it police or DOE officers? So when it comes to enforcement.
It could be either. These regulations can be obviously enforced by the police, absolutely. Department of Agriculture officer, I can't remember the exact title of their office. Their officer can enforce it, and yes, Department of Environment officers can also enforce this law. So depending on the situation, would be who would be doing the active enforcement. As I said, we fully expect that initial stuff will be more education and outreach rather than enforcement. And DOE is going to be doing the vast majority of that education outreach. It's, again, Sandy, thank you for having us on. It's why I'm here, even though I'm not a terrestrial researcher talking about these issues. And so I apologize. I take a chance to apologize to your listeners that we couldn't have one of them on here, but they're actually all out in the field in the sister islands right now, the ones who could speak to this. So we couldn't get them on. But yeah, you will be hearing us talking about this a lot, hopefully before any kind of enforcement occurs. And it would probably be DOE officers in the first place, but it could be police depending on the situation. The wild dog problem is probably a good example of where police and DOA often end up working together to deal with the problem of a problem animal. We might see things like that here as well, depending on the situation. But that's I expect it to all be a bit down the road before we figure that one out.
Okay. Question here from Alejandro. He wants to know who will be able to cull the feral cat. So how does the program actually work?
Okay, so there's two things here. There's the DOE, the programs the DOE there's the programs the Department of Environment are currently doing, and there's the regulations. So I'll need to try to address them separately, please. The Department of Environment program, it is Department of Environment running it with support from the Department of Agriculture. So we're the ones trapping them in that program. The regulations are written generally to address alien species and particularly feral species in the wild, and they apply to everybody in the country. So hypothetically, from our perspective, and one of these programs, the Department of Environment could essentially outsource it to workers to conduct some of the trapping or some of the activities. But equally, just as obtained, I would suggest, before these regulations came into force, private individuals are able to trap, catch, kill wild or feral animals. One of the animals listed in this as an excluded species is agoutis, because people have been hunting agoutis, forever here. And what we wanted to make sure was that we didn't create a problem for people continue, hunting agoutis and doing what they were doing with feral animals, wild animals already. With feral alien species already. And so, yeah, it is open to anyone. But as with all things, this regulation stops where the animals law starts, which is where the humane treatment issue comes in. And that's always going to look different for different species in different situations. But we need to be very clear about this. This does not mean it is open season to be mean to animals. That is not what these regulations allow. It is not what they suggest, and it is not what anybody should think they suggest. If you're hunting agouti, these regs don't stop you. If you happen to decide you want to hunt some of the feral bunny rabbits, actual, long-eared, hop-around bunny rabbits that have gotten loose in certain areas and have gone feral, and just like they're hunted around the world, you decide you want to hunt them. These regs do not stop you doing that, but these regs do not empower you to be mean to animals either when you're doing it. And whether that is your neighbor's dog or an agouti, it doesn't matter to the regs. They're neutral on all that because it's handled under different provisions.
All right, so we have some questions here regarding if the culling of cats is going to now mean that we're going to have a rat explosion or an iguana explosion, because people are saying, well, the cats are keeping the rat and iguana population in control. Definitely not the iguanas. I don't know why anybody's saying that, because that's clearly not the case. But anyway, let's talk about rats.
Good question. And you're right. The iguanas is a good example. That many of these animals are not necessarily predator controlled, or at least not controlled by feral cats as the predators. We saw that with iguanas, and the country needed a program to address iguanas. The country has had a program to address rats for decades now, run through the Environmental Health Department. And so this does not change that, the need to address some of these animals specifically and the problems they cause. The other interesting thing with cats and rats, as shown by research in other places, is, again, rat populations are not predator controlled, at least not by feral cats. They tend to be driven more by food availability. And so a pile of food shows up in the environment, the rat population explodes because they can have babies even quicker than cats can. And then they eat out all the food and the population drops back off. And whether that is somebody has thrown out garbage improperly, or certain fruit trees coming into bloom, because as we all know that's how wildlife works. When the fruit trees bloom, the things that eat those fruits, then bloom afterwards. The same thing with rats, and their populations blooming, to really push the blooming analogy here. And so what the cats do is, yes, they do predate on small rodents, and so they will make the rats more wary about coming out. You will not see the rats as much when the cat is there. Yes, the cat will take the occasional rat or mouse, rat, but really the cats are going to be looking at something that's easier for them to eat, like a lizard, which is going to bite back like a rat will. And so the cats are quite good at making the rats hide, making them appear more scarce, but they're actually, it turns out, not good at really reducing their numbers in a meaningful way. So no, removing cats from an area should not result in there being significantly more rats. If there is an area that has a rat problem, that needs to be addressed as a rat problem, not as a feral cat problem. One of the things that we're doing with our work, and this is going back now to the Department of Environment program on Little Cayman, is while we're trapping feral cats, we're also putting out trap surveys, shall we say, for the rats in the same area, to track what happens to those populations as we remove the cats, in case there is an uptick that suggests, okay, there now needs to be increased rat control measures in these areas. But really, the rat control measure is a separate issue that needs to be dealt with on its own validity, because no one wants rats around the place. If you have a rat problem, the solution is not feral cats. The solution is getting rid of the rats.
So here's a bit more information, again, based on the Australian model. Number one, apparently feral cats grow larger. I don't know if this is also true in Cayman, but they tend to grow larger than domesticated animals. And one of the interesting things that they found, and this is why responsible pet ownership is so important, is that even domesticated animals, owners think they know what their cats are up to when they're not around them. And people say, well, my little cat, my little Fluffy, doesn't kill any wildlife. And Professor Legge said that domesticated cats actually roam much further than the owners ever thought that they would. And they discovered this by research that has fitted them with GPS trackers. And she goes on to say that pet cat owners are not always aware of their pets' movements as they think they are. And there's a lot of variation across pet cats and how much wildlife they kill. Some cats don't kill wildlife, and yet there are others that kill a very large number of wildlife. But it really comes down to different management options being different. And they say that they're not going to go into and lay poison baits around suburbs and carry out shooting programs. But of course, as they get into certain areas, they will do what they have to do to bring the population under control. So they're talking about threatened species inside a 123 square kilometer enclosure, giving the animals the opportunity to at least thrive in a particular environment without the risk of feral predators. So yeah, very, very, very interesting.
Yeah.
So
And
we
what
do.
I
Mhm.
would say, and one of the problems that we have that someplace like Australia, we're talking about 123 square kilometers, if they're one
They're big.
enclosure,
Yeah.
the islands are much smaller here. And so if you
Yes.
think about the Booby Pond in Little Cayman, anybody who's seen that and how close that is to people, and the ability of those of feral animals to go sort of back and forth between your garbage can, the booby sanctuary, when there's chicks in there, in the case of the feral cats, then up to the dump in Little Cayman, and then work their way back down into somebody's garbage.
Mhm.
We Unfortunately, we cannot fence off our native species from our our feral cats and say, okay, you're over there, you're over there. It doesn't work that way. We have native species throughout the country. Something like the brown boobies, where they're down to just a couple of handfuls of nesting animals. We can work specifically with them. Something like the red-footed booby sanctuary in Little Cayman.
Mhm.
No, yeah, you can't kind of fence that off or separate that as easily, because it's integrated into that part of the island. So yeah, it is an interesting challenge we have with our native species being spread throughout the country, because all of this was their home
Mhm.
and is their home still.
Yep. So again, the conservation.com has quite a bit of information on the feral cat issue. Um, you know, trying to get this issue under control in other jurisdictions as well. So it's unfortunate, but again, it's an issue that humans have largely contributed to. So Ruby says, I do not agree with cat culling at all. We are in 2023. Sort it out. Open a sanctuary for the boobies. They don't need to cull them.
Yeah, but we have the sanctuary for the boobies. Unfortunately, the cats come into it. And as I said, for some of these animals, which are the brown boobies and the brack, are a good example. Up in very well, up at the end of the bluff, there's no people around. This isn't about needing to separate the boobies from the people. This is about how do we keep feral cats away from the boobies. And yeah, it involves, unfortunately, trapping and removing those animals. And in the case of the brown boobies, the rats as well, it's we need to get both of those feral species away from these few remaining boobies if we can. Yeah.
Well, it's incredibly interesting, Ruby, when you say to sort it out, because the scientific research is there and scientists from all over the world, they've written and done a bunch of studies. And the conclusion that they've come to is you've got to cull these feral cats. That's their solution. They're the experts. So as a layperson, when you tell them to sort it out, they say, well, here's what a research has shown, decades of research. This is how we're going to sort it out. But then when they tell us that this is what works and this is what has worked elsewhere, we don't want them to do that. Even Hawaii has had to resort to the culling of feral cats in order to save their endangered bird species.
Yes.
They're sorting it out. It's just that you don't like the way that they're sorting it out. And they're telling you that there is no other viable option, that everything else that a layperson thinks is going to work, just isn't viable, and it's not going to work.
Yeah. And this isn't just the birds. I mean, remember, Little Cayman is, probably our jewel example here in the Cayman Islands. You've got the rock iguanas in Little Cayman, which are kind of all over the place, as they should be. And when they hatch out, they're just a big lizard, perfect for a feral cat to be looking for. Little Cayman also has a beautiful, I'm going to call it a long-nosed green lizard. It's a native anole. It's not on the other two islands as far as I'm aware. But again, not a terrestrial biologist, so let's just stick with saying it is definitely a Little Cayman. It is unique over there, and yeah, it's the size of a lizard. Perfect, cat food size for these feral animals. And again, these lizards should be all across the island, which is why feral animal control over there is more dispersed, and it's just you can't fence in a lizard kind of thing. It is designed to crawl over stuff and through things. We have to accept that we cannot keep putting our native species into zoos. They are part of our native environment. They're part of the wild. If we want to save them as such, as part of our cultural identity, we have to save them where they are and where they're supposed to be, which is native species in the wild all over the Cayman Islands.
All right, we do have a caller who's on the program today. Caller, good morning and welcome to the program. Hold on a second. Why am I not hearing you today? Hold on. What's going on? Give me 1 second here. I think you can hear me and I can't hear you. Hold on. Hi, caller. There we go. I was wondering why the ring was because normally when it's probably plugged into the board, you can't hear it ring. And I thought, ooh, that's ringing nice and loud today. Good morning.
Morning. I'm glad to have you, Mr. Bothwell, on the program and talking about this important issue.
Good morning. Thanks for calling.
I took my kids over to the Sister Islands a few months ago to show them the islands before they're finally destroyed. And one of the things that stood out to me is that I didn't see as many of the iguanas as I did the time that I was there before, which was a few years back, which was kind of disappointing because, I did see, I think we saw 2 in Little Cayman, but that was it. And normally I've seen a lot more than that in the past. And you rightly point out that that how delicate this balance is. And I think one of the things that people might not consider, because we live in what we think of as a developed paradise, is that cats that are truly wild can be quite evasive. And one might think that you can just call the cat over and they'll come and you can pet them and take them away and get them spayed and neutered. But that's not the reality. If a cat grew up in the wild and it doesn't have very much contact with humans, they're going to be quite evasive. And that is going to require you to trap them, and sometimes they're smart to even traps.
Yeah.
So I'm not suggesting that that the only way to deal with this problem is culling, but I just want to make this point because I think that if it becomes necessary to cull them, I think people need to understand the reality of what we're dealing with. These are smart predators that are good at stealth and evading people and having the upper hand. So I know this is an emotional issue, and I'm not like a person that normally thinks and talks about pets. And I know how people feel about it, but I think the reality is the reality, and I hope that what does not happen with the cat situation is what happened with the lionfish situation, because that kind of got. I mean, I'm not trying to blame anyone. I'm just saying that it got really bad, and the toll that they take on the marine life in our reefs is quite detrimental. to our environment. So I don't know if you have anything to say about that.
Okay, Manny. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
All righty. So, yes.
Yeah. So I'll just say caller's absolutely correct in everything he said. And I'll apologize if my connection goes spotty. We're having some issues here where I am. But yes, and this is one of the reasons why we often talk about a cat control program rather than eradication, because as the caller said, to removing all of the animals, very, very, very hard to do. So yeah, that would be a separate discussion if we were to try and talk about, hypothetically eradicating all feral cats in Little Cayman. Would be a very different looking program than the controls we're doing now. And it's why what we're doing in Cayman Brac is just feral cat control around the booby nesting spots to try and reduce that pressure. We don't expect to get all the cats or the rats around them, but just to try and give them a fighting chance. Yeah, and again, why we put into place these regulations, because again, they also include the prohibited species, half of the regs, which is about trying to make sure that we don't have new problem species getting in here and emerging. So yeah, your caller is sort of completely right in everything that they said. And yeah, hopefully these regs are a step towards trying to make sure that we don't replicate the problems of, I would say the green iguanas even more than the lionfish. But yeah, lionfish are a really good example, comparable to, feral predators that are out there eating everything that they can get in their mouth. Yeah.
So Steven says, make microchipping mandatory, hold owners responsible. Any cat caught within the sanctuary needs to be culled, and then ban the importation of further cats. Are people actually importing cats? Is that still a thing? I don't think there'd be enough of them here to go around. But anyway, Debbie says, birds can fly away. I still don't get it. But the bird nest can't fly away.
Well, this is the thing. I mean, cats are effective predators. Animals can run, birds can fly. It's a constant contest between predator and prey. And if predators were not successful, they would have died off a long time ago, which cats did not. But yeah, you're also right, Sandra, that one of the things is these feral cats are probably, and the rats, and even the occasional dog if it gets in there, will be trying to prey particularly on the hatchlings in the nest, which are small enough that they can go for them. If you have seen a feral cat stalking the feral chickens, a lot of times, particularly, what they're looking at is those little chicks, and it's not, if not for the mother chicken, those chicks are cat food. And so the same thing happens then in the booby nesting. The cat is there really looking for the chick, probably, but if the parent then finds it, particularly the cat, as just recently happened, cats come in and got a head bite onto the chick and killed the chick. You can imagine, we also see dead adult boobies with signs of cat involvement around them. The cat is not hunting that animal for food per se. It's probably just fighting it. But they're coming into these nesting areas looking for food because, as you say, Sandy, the nest can't move, the chick can't get away. So that's the real weakness. We have the same thing with the Sister Islands rock iguana on Little Cayman, where what we were seeing is, we get the little hatchlings come out of their eggs. We've got a lot, I still got a decent number, shall we say, although the biologists who work with this on a regular basis may give me a bit of a slant eye, because those numbers are in a bit of trouble for various reasons. But what we do not see in significant numbers any longer when we do the surveys apparently is the kind of hatchling to yearling size animals, the ones where we really believe that the feral cats are having a distinct impact. One of the researchers told me the other day was something like the hatchling detections went from the hatchlings, the surveys they got was getting something like 20% of the numbers counted were hatchlings back in 2014. In 2019, it was down to 4%.
Mm-hmm.
And was it all cats? No, probably not. Were cats playing a significant part of that? Probably yes. It's one of the
Yes.
reasons why we had to go and start doing a head starting program on Little Cayman for the last couple of years of taking these hatchlings, putting them into cages, feeding them up, rearing them up for I think it was up to about 2 years. We had to do them before we felt they were a size large enough that we could release them, that they would have a decent hope of surviving. That's incredibly labor and expense intensive to do that at the kind of scale to make an impact in the long term. Basically, you're talking a very, very problematic program versus can we just please do something about the feral animals in the wild? And that for cats, that starts, or cats and dogs, that starts with responsible pet ownership. Keep them clean, keep them spayed and neutered, and please microchip them if you can, so that if your pet gets away, your neighbor can return it to you.
All right, we have a caller on the line. Good morning, caller. Welcome to the program.
Hello, good morning.
Morning, sir.
I just want to say that not only boobies in the rock, but cats also have done a number here in Grand Cayman on Hickory Dick. As a youngster growing up, we used to go in the afternoon on the Iron Shore off South Church Street there. And all up and down South Church Street used to be the Hickory Dick nest right in the rock. They didn't build a nest. They just had it right on the ground. And we used to watch them with their antics. It was nearly entertainment because they would fly way up 100 feet, 250 feet, and then they'd come crashing down towards the ground, and they'd start dust. They would come so low. And we used to just go and watch them like that. Just flight after flight after flight, they would do that. I don't know if they were getting mosquitoes or whatever, because they were thick as sand then. But, we also saw back then, we saw the effects of what cats would go and hunt the babies on the ground. So I just mentioned that this is a long-standing issue. And yes, I feel for cats, I feel for them as well, but it's like the same thing with iguanas. Reality is reality. God bless you all. Don't let me take any more of your time. Good. Bye-bye.
I appreciate it so much. So, I mean, it strikes me though I think the amount of education that still has to be done really on this topic, because if it were that easy, if the birds could just fly away, I suppose we wouldn't even be having this discussion. It wouldn't be an issue. I mean, there'd be no issue here. The birds would be self-protecting themselves. But I think the point really is that the birds are not able to do so. They're not able to protect themselves, and they're not able to protect their nests, and they are becoming endangered, and this is of grave concern. We have another solution here, another recommendation from Ruby. I think we lost our guest, actually. John's connection has dropped. We'll wait for him to jump back in. So Ruby says, catch them and open a cat cafe. But Ruby, I mean, I think we have just established that even catching them is not that easy. Trying to quote unquote domesticate them in some way. I don't know what a cat cafe is supposed to be exactly. What are you're having them sit down drinking coffee, or am I going to drink coffee and have a look at them? Like, I'm not sure exactly what that means, but that sounds like a pie in the sky kind of idea, Ruby. I don't know what that means even. Right? What's a cat cafe? Someone has jokingly said that they could make a lot of money if they could name it. They said, I would be rich if I name the cafe the Inexpensive Puss. Lord have mercy. So here's another article that someone has just sent about how Tibbles the cat killed a rare species of bird to extinction. So again, I wonder how many of you who are animal lovers, and I consider myself as part of that category have really done any degree of research on this subject to really see what the reality is. You know, I I just find that people are making suggestions and saying things that just don't make any sense. So Soka says her experience has been the cats that she's feeding. Her amateur observations is that they're no longer killing animals in the wild. And again, the research just does not support that position. You know, Hawaii cat culling is an issue. There's a whole Vice thing about Hawaii's feral cat war. I figure I could probably play some of these, although knowing YouTube, we might get in a little bit of a mind here if we try to play some of this. But I feel like there has to be a general educational process of people who are supportive of doing nothing or who think that the birds should be able to just protect themselves. So here's this one about Tibbles, the cat. This is in New Zealand. And it says that New Zealand has some of the strictest pet quarantine and import laws in the world, and for good reason. Being mammal free until the arrival of humans, New Zealand was once home to a diverse population of endemic wildlife species. Throughout its history, the increase in the human settlements have threatened the native wildlife. Added to that were the non-native animals that were brought from other continents, which became dominant species, putting the endemic or native species at a disadvantage or driving them to extinction. One such extinction event occurred when cats were brought to an island with a rare species of flightless birds. Here's how Tibbles the cat killed a rare species of birds to extinction. So sad. So it talks about the Lyle's wren is the best known of around 5 flightless what are they? Passerines? I don't even know what kind of bird that is, but they're a songbird apparently with a notable feature of having 3 toes on their feet pointing forward and one pointing backward to make perching easier. Interesting. These birds used to mainly inhabit islands, but unfortunately are all now extinct and in spite of conservation efforts. Why the Lyle's wren was widespread in all of New Zealand prehistorically, it became extinct once the Maori settled on the island and introduced a Polynesian rat and other non-native animals which preyed on the birds. It is believed that the birds soon drifted to the nearby Stevens Island, which was connected to the mainland back when the sea levels were lower. The birds were first spotted by the assistant lighthouse keeper, David Lyle of Stevens Island, and named after him. His cat, Tibbles, oh Jesus, his own cat, used to bring him carcasses of the birds that nobody knew existed until then. Jesus. So in June 1879 marks the beginning of human activity in Stevens Island. Until then, the wildlife grew and evolved without intervention. By 1894, the land was surveyed and the lighthouse was built, and soon David Lyle moved into his post with his cat Tibbles, which would sometimes bring back the carcasses of the wren. Lyle himself, and of course this is a domesticated cat, of course he was feeding this cat. Lyle himself had only seen the bird alive twice and described it as a nocturnal creature. He called it the rock wren, as it would be running around the rocks like a mouse and so quick in its movements that he could not get near enough to hit it or stick with a stick or stone. My apologies. Being interested in national history, Lyle sent specimens to naturalist Walter Buller, who identified them to be a new species. Zoologist Walter Rothschild also received 9 more species through the courier dealer and taxidermist Henry H. Travers. So Walter Buller, a naturalist who was well known in the field of New Zealand ornithology and the author of A History of the Birds of New Zealand, received the specimen from Lyle in June of 1894. He sent it to London so that the artist John Gerard Ceulemans, I think that's how that's pronounced, could make a lithograph plate to accompany its description. Lyle finds further specimens and sells them to Henry H. Travers, who then sells them to zoologist and politician Walter Rothschild. Oh, mess. Both Buller and Rothschild made descriptions of the wren before its extinction. They were described to have olive brown plumage with a yellow stripe through the eye. The females had a gray underside, while in males it was brownish yellow with the body feathers edged with brown. So I'm going to show you guys what they believe is an image of this particular species of bird. Really, really sad that it no longer exists because of his cat. What on earth are the chances? I see you there, John. Just give me one quick second. I'm just reading a story about how a domesticated cat caused an entire species of bird to go extinct on New Zealand. So anyway, though Tibbles is often blamed for the extinction of the Lyle's wren, there were other feral cats on the island that hunted the flightless bird for food. It is believed that a pregnant cat brought to the island escaped, resulting in feral cats becoming a new invasive species. Cats were not native to New Zealand. In fact, except for 3 species of bats, New Zealand did not have any land-based mammals until the Maori and the Europeans started arriving. So interesting. Wow. The introduction of these new mammals permanently altered the distribution of the native wildlife. And though the effects of feral cats on native species are not well documented, it is believed that they were responsible for the extinction of 6 local species of birds and 70 subspecies. There've also been a dramatic decrease in other native wildlife populations, including that of rabbits, short-tailed bats, black stilt kabapoo. I don't even know what that is. We'll have to Google that. And the North Island saddleback, which are brought back through conservation efforts and legal euthanization of feral cats. So again, New Zealand has a legal euthanization of feral cats program. The account of Tibbles being the sole reason for the extinction of Lyle's wren was actually claimed by Walter Rothschild. Later in 2004, the research of Goldbrith and Brown and Medway uncovered the actual story that it was the work of more than one cat. According to the research, the cats were introduced in Stevens Island between February the 17th and 20th of 1894 by the Europeans who arrived there to build and work on the lighthouse. A pregnant cat escaped, resulting in the increase of cat population as an invasive species. And by 1925, all of the cats on the island were exterminated. And only 16 to 18 species of the Lyle's wren existed, including some fossil bones. They were collected by Lyle, Tibbles, and professional collectors. So wow, didn't take long for them to take out from 1894 to 1925. By the time they exterminated all of the cats on the island, my God, they had done such devastating amount of damage already. So isn't that a sad situation? Wow. All right, let's pull Mr. John back in. John, what a beautiful bird that none of us will ever be able to see again, because now it's extinct, thanks to feral cats.
Yes, I apologize to you and your listeners. I have technical issues here in our office. Had to jump on a second computer. Yeah, and New Zealand is one of those places where, because of their size and remoteness, they have all these unique animals which evolved without people and without certain predators or certain kinds of predators. And so once people and the species that we brought with us showed up there, they have this just incredible record of the effect or history. And so we just and they could see the human population greatly increased, and of course number of feral species. So yeah, and the other spots in the Pacific have some of those histories as well. But yeah, New Zealand has these things, and like I said, they're animals because half a world away from us, very different, very beautiful, and we just don't see them anymore. In Cayman, we have to go into the museum or put out a penny to see things like the native thrush, or the small, some other animals that have gone extinct here. And there's only one or two to speak of, well, 3 or 4. So we don't have that same knowledge of the loss. But you're absolutely right that people and their feral animals have done a number on species all around the world, including driving some to extinction.
Wow, crazy. All right, folks. Thanks to the listener who shared that article. You know, what a mess. All right, so we've got a couple more questions and comments. This person says, I saw a few people asking in the comment section if there's going to be like people who can get registered to cull cats. I don't think that that's what's happening at this stage. Is that correct?
No. So we are not running a cull for cats like we do with the green iguanas. That is not something we're doing. It's not something we have any plans for right now. So no, the regs are purely alien species regulations to give the ability to deal with a variety of issues. And as far as the Department of Environment programs go right now, the only ones we have are the 2 programs that we are doing ourselves. And no, we've got no plans for anything like the green iguana cull program or having that expanded out to other species at this time.
Yes.
Even just from a purely cost perspective, it's not on the radar right now.
So RD says that in New Zealand, you're encouraged to run over any bunny rabbits that you see in the road. They're invasive and causing havoc. When I was there, I was told to run them over on the road. Oh my God, that's crazy. Another listener to the program says your guest is very informative and also soothing to listen to.
Thank you.
I had a gang of roosters waking me up, and I called the agriculture department, and they set traps and captured them, and the children population went down dramatically. When you say children population, children of the roosters, like the baby chicks, I think I need to call them as well. Yeah, we got a problem in our neighborhood with the chickens, that's for sure. All right, well, thank you so much, Denny, sharing a couple YouTube video links here for you guys. So again, folks, it's sad that we've gotten to this point. And this person says, blessed good morning, San. Can you please ask, what about cats that stay in a community and come out or goes from house to house, not wild? Thanks. So again, even domesticated cats are out there roaming and doing damage. So you shouldn't, people think because they stay in a particular area that's maybe seen as their territory, that they're not going beyond that territory and doing any damage. So what about those cats?
No, they're absolutely a problem. But again, this is alien species regulations, feral species. So we're trying to worry about those animals that are completely feral out in the wild first from a Department of Environment perspective. But responsible pet ownership means taking care of your pets. If they are your pet, they're your pet. How much you let them roam, whether you share them with other people, that's kind of you. We just don't want these animals roaming out into the wild, please. That's when they become a problem. What responsible pet ownership looks like, what is safe for those cats, is they're walking around allowed to roam freely. Again, this is something that the country may need to have a discussion on, and what that looks like, who should be involved in setting those rules. And but the problem is your cat is possibly going further than just where you place a short place. But it is a difference as a feral relations. Responsible pet ownership, how much let dogs, cats, whatever wander off the leash, that's kind of a whole nother problem, but it is one that the country needs to look at.
All right, so someone mentioned that in Canada they have some sort of program where they build little houses for the cats to keep them warm and feed them, but yet in Cayman we are killing them. So I'm not sure what part of Canada that is, but just from a cursory look, it looks like Canada has its own feral culling program. So
absolutely. Pick any place as big and as Canada with as much wildlife as they have, and there's nothing in the regulations that say that, these kind of catch and keep programs for feral animals, feral cats, can't be conducted by the people who want to do that. Absolutely, that sounds very nice. There's examples in various places of sometimes quite large kept colonies of no longer wild cats that people do and manage, usually by NGOs and community groups, because they have the interest in doing that and the ability to do it in a slightly more honest with the public way than, say, a government putting its funds towards a giant cattery for alien species. When there's, and I hate to get into this, but there's so many calls on government funds for good things, including conservation of native species from our perspective. So, but yeah, nothing is saying that some group, perhaps even potentially with some government support through the arms of government that do that for worthy causes, could not engage in trap, neuter, and keep programs. Absolutely, but it's not it's not a native species protection program. Then that's a pet and what to do with all cats. Keeping them out of the wild. More power to anybody else. Anybody wants to try and engage in that.
All right, so it's definitely an issue all over the world. John Bothwell, thank you so much for coming on the program today and spending a little bit of time with us to dive into this issue. Feel free to come back at any point in time. Brenda says people need to stop comparing Cayman to other countries in the world. We don't live there. We live in Cayman, legislate for Cayman. We can't legislate for Canada and anywhere else in the world. Well, ironically, Miss Brenda, those places are doing the exact same thing because no one else has come up with any other solution. This is the point that I really want to drive home. It's great to talk about all these cafes and all these other things, but no one has come up with a solution to protect the species that are native to these countries without cat culling, because cats are in the millions. I mean, the numbers by country of feral cats that are out there is just astronomical. In Canada alone, there's an estimated 5.4 to 9.6 free roaming cats, right? With anywhere up to 4.1 million of those being feral or unowned. And of course, there's a lot of concerns also about the welfare of the cats themselves, but of what they do to the ecosystem once they're introduced. So no one else has come up with a solution to deal with this. It's huge across North America, Canada, the United States, New Zealand, Australia, everywhere in the world. So if we want to compare ourselves to other people, I don't mind doing so up to a certain point. And the point being that feral cat populations are out of control all over the world, and no one has come up with another solution that works. There might be one or two little towns that oh yeah, well, let's just try to feed them and whatever. But on a wide scale, apparently, there's sufficient research to show. Here's an article out of Canada, the estimated number of birds killed by house cats. That's a publication from 2019. So there's lots of research, folks, that just does not support the position that as much as we like furry animals, that we can continue to let them roam in the wild, uncontrolled. Mr. Bothwell, thank you so much. We really appreciate you joining the program today. I think his internet stuck again. All right, some internet issues. I'm sure he would be saying thank you for having me on the program today. Let's watch a little snippet about feral cats. Oh, there you are. I think you're kind of back now. Yeah, the internet's a bit spotty today. I think you're live now.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Sandy. Okay, thank you for having me on. I apologize to your listeners for our internet here. Government, like I said, we try to do it as economically as possible. Anybody has questions, doe.ky, we have the information on there. You can research it for yourself. Know what the regulations say and make up your own mind about all the issues around it based on on information. Anyone has questions, please do contact us. We're happy to talk to any groups about this or any individuals as well. Again, doe.ky for our website for the information on how to get in touch with us. We're happy to talk to anybody anytime about this or anything else conservation or Cayman wildlife related.
All right. Thank you very much. We appreciate it. All right, folks, stay tuned for this educational segment.
We're just gonna have a nice conversation, you and me, okay?
Cats are so special.
Her fur is so soft.
She's too smart for us. I've never seen a mean cat, ever.
People find it hard to equate this sort of cute, cuddly ball of fur with the killing machine, which they actually are when they're in the mountains.
Some people are worried about cats being a threat to birds.
Cats are by far and away the most devastating predator here, and they're really, hard to catch in an environment like this.
The only thing that bothers me is when man gets involved in their evolution.
Our job is not to kill cats, it's to save endangered species.
The reason there's so many cats is people are not getting their cats spayed and neutered.
The problem isn't too many cats, it's cats outside at all.
Researchers found the bodies of 6 Hawaiian petrels. All had been dragged from their burrows by feral cats.
The state says feral cats pose risks to public health and wildlife.
Officials say feral cats have been taking the chicks from a wildlife refuge.
A feral cat is the same species as the domestic cat, but out in the wild. They hunt for survival and sport.
Cats are probably the worst introduced predator that we have on these islands. You'll see the cat go in, and then the cat will pull the bird out and just throttle it and tear it to shreds on camera.
The breast is often ripped open. There'll be bites in the bones. The bird will be just kind of open, face up.
They'll eat the brain or they'll eat the chest muscles, and then they'll leave the rest and they go and kill another one. They'll just keep working their way through a colony, especially a dense colony, until there's nothing left.
Cats terrorize birds all over the world. It's estimated they kill around 2.4 billion birds in the US each year. But the stakes are higher on islands, like Hawaii, where birds haven't evolved a defense against them. The cats invaded with the European colonizers in the 1800s, and they quickly acclimated. A female cat and her offspring can produce more than 400,000 cats within 7 years. As the largest mammalian predator, they had free reign over the bird population. Today, Hawaii has roughly 2 million cats, which is an even bigger problem because 95 of Hawaii's 142 bird species have already disappeared. And another species might be headed that way. The number of Nuel's shearwaters declined by 94% over 2 decades. And now, 90% of the entire species lives on Kauai alone. With all this at stake, animal advocates are disagreeing over a contentious question: what to do about the feral cats.
The solution is getting cats off the landscape. So first and foremost, predator control is absolutely key.
That's where Alex comes in. She tracks down and removes feral cats in the mountains, accessing them the only way possible, by helicopter. Alex and the trap team will fly out with Andre, the bird expert, and will often spend 4 days hiking across treacherous terrain.
Yep, copy, roger.
The majority of our work is checking and running traps for mostly rats and cats, the day-to-day.
Alex, who's a certified sharpshooter, has been trapping cats since 2016 with a predator control company called Halix. And this year, the county gave them $50,000 to fund feral cat control.
This is one of our cat trapping stations here at Upper Manoa. I'm just gonna get a little bit of this cotton ball in the lure here, and being careful to keep everything really separate. And then I'm actually gonna put this right under the trap cover on top of the trap. So the idea being that in order to get a good smell of this lure, the animal's gonna have to stand on the pans and lift up which detracts its attention away from the trap itself, focuses it on this right here, and forces it to step on the pin. It's a beautiful trick. The mechanism doesn't really matter. If you understand trapping and how you need to think like the animal, and so in that kind of artistic sense, but then also biologically understand what you're doing. Trapping is both a science and an art. Hopefully, any cat that passes through this area trying to enter the seabird colony will be encouraged to interact with this trap and be captured before it gets to the newels.
Once a cat falls for the trap,
perfect.
Alex euthanizes them according to American veterinary guidelines.
What does make it easier is knowing that we are euthanizing them humanely and quickly and ending their short, really hard lives and saving birds in the process. To see the condition of some of these animals deal with, facing a life outside, they're just full of parasites, whether that's fleas or ticks, mange, missing patches of fur, visible wounds, missing eyes, cataracts, heartworm, tapeworms, and stomach worms.
While Alex sets the traps for the cats, Andre checks the seabird burrows along cliffs and interprets bird songs to assess the population.
It's like a donkey, like a braying donkey.
Their goal is to create predator-free bird sanctuaries in order to rebound the near-extinct Noel shearwater population.
One of the really important things about these birds is they're literally coming from the sea into the mountains, and then with their guano, they're spreading all those marine nutrients into the mountains. So they're basically building, all these watersheds are founded on the nutrients that they're bringing up from the sea. If the birds disappear from here, they're almost doomed. Unfortunately, this burrow was predated by a cat 2 years ago. Even on steep slopes like this, they're still getting predated. So this is the classic Noel shearwater burrow. So you can see there's the burrow underneath there in the vegetation.
Nope, no one's been there yet. You can't smell them.
Yeah, they do have a really nice scent. You kind of get attached to different birds. I've been following this bird every year. It's really cool to, see them coming back. Since predator control and active management has been occurring, call rates are going up literally every year, and we're seeing more birds coming back and more birds fledging.
We're saving species here, and cat control, yes, is part of it. Obviously, we have a very complicated relationship with cats as animals. We love our cats and understand that people are protective of their cats.
I think part of the problem is that people really identify with cats because they think of cats as their pets, but it's hard for them to identify with the birds.
Did any of you guys come out yet? Kitty, kitty, kitties. Meow. I got so many cats that I feed that I just call them all kitty. I think that the people who are killing them, Alex, they're paid to kill cats. I don't know how they can look in the mirror or sleep at night. That's murder. That's out and out murder. There are a number of people on Kauai, maybe about a dozen of us, that make it a full-time mission to get as many cats fixed as possible.
Judy Dalton spends about 6 hours a night feeding cats and trapping them so they can get neutered before being released back outside, a method called trap, neuter, and release, or TNR, which cat advocates believe is the solution to reducing the population. Though many wildlife experts argue these colonies don't actually diminish in size.
I've trapped at least 60 cats here over the years. I just have to keep on trapping them and trapping them. I put out my traps, get them fixed, and they spend the night with me, and then the next morning I can let them go and return them to where I came from. I will usually take half of a can of Fancy Feast fish and shrimp, their favorite, and I would put that back here. Okay, so I put, here's the jackpot. I will wait here till usually midnight.
Judy isn't just running a cat cafeteria, she's also running a cat travel agency.
I find people are visiting Kauai, they're flying back with an airline. I say, can you take these 2 kitties?
Locals on the island also call her up to rescue cats. That's how Judy met Bob Lency.
I happened to notice 2 kittens through the cement grating down in the sewer. And my wife had called Judy, and Judy came over, and we went down there and pulled the 2 kittens out. So instead of Bootsy sleeping in a mud puddle every single night. Now she's sleeping on my side of the bed, and I got to compete with her for my pillow.
Every night, Bob cares for cats at a colony near the airport.
And now Buddy is going to be on the left-hand side as we come down here. This is where you usually see them. Now Squeaky will be on the right-hand side, Buddy's going to be on the left. There's Buddy right there, he just came out. Buddy, buddy, buddy. Buddy, buddy. Psst, psst. Come on, bud. Hop in. There you go. Good boy. He'll actually stay in my trunk of my car, and I'll just sit here, and we just have a, a hugging moment. This is what I do for at least an hour every single night. You want some of this stuff? There you go. Come on. Every single week, I'm buying 32 to 40 cans of cat food and treats and stuff. And my wife and I just fund this ourselves. If I ever was in a situation where I couldn't feed them, what would happen to the cats? I mean, that worries me, because, I've been doing this now for 8 years. Psst. There you are. I feel like a dummy standing here with an umbrella, and Buddy is in my trunk, and I'm standing here with an umbrella, and people are driving by going, but I do what I do because I love it. I do have a special place for the birds, and I got a special place for the cats.
Some of the cat advocates' beliefs about cat behavior are based on their own observations. Like the cats they feed don't go after the birds.
You often hear this sort of thing, oh, well, the cats in my area would never kill a bird.
We have not seen them.
I've never seen ever one of the cats go after the seabirds.
They would fly away so easily.
So it's kind of a bit of denial.
For a while, cat lovers could bring the animals they trapped to the island's only animal shelter in order to be adopted. But as seen with the internet icon Pinky the Cat, some are tough to tame.
Pinky, settle down, bud. Careful, Cole. Careful.
Feral cats do not do well in shelter environments. They decline really rapidly.
Sheltering ferals was seen as a form of predator control, but recently the shelter enforced its new policy: no ferals.
So we don't offer that anymore. It's not in our philosophy. We would gladly take feral cats in if we could offer them another option, a positive option, but we just don't have that currently.
What the Humane Society does offer is surgery for feral cats that get trapped and then released.
There is no way for us in a short period of time to remove every single cat from Kauai. So we might as well focus on what we can do and what there is funding to do and resources to do. And as a humane procedure is to really push spaying and neutering. We would love for the bird populations on Hawaii to be 100 times better than what they are right now. But that in itself is a long-term process.
There was a bill that the city council was trying to pass to eradicate all the cats by 2025.
I urge this committee and council to promulgate an ordinance that addresses the impacts and offers real solutions for the management of these feral cats with the ultimate goal of no cats on the landscape by 2025.
Their lives should be spared. There's no question of doubt about it. I think the eradication of the feral cats in the total population is a horrible thing to do.
My bit was, if you eradicate the cats, you're going to change the balance of nature.
But remember, the European colonizers disrupted nature's balance when they brought cats here to begin with. Maka'ala Ka'aumoana, a Hawaiian kapuna or elder, spoke at the hearing in support of the bill. She says the loss of these birds would have a direct impact on Hawaiian communities and their culture.
So the birds played a very, very important role. If you look at the Hawaiian history, those were the feathers that created all of the markings of our rulers, of our ali'i. Culturally, they are a partner. They are a brother. In the Hawaiian culture, we work together with the earth. And when something is out of balance, it takes both the earth and us to rebalance it, to correct it. These seabirds that the cats are killing guide the fishermen. This isn't a discussion that we should be having about whether the cat can be controlled. The cat does not belong here, period, at all.
It's interesting when people think we need to pick a side on the cats, predation versus pets, and you don't have to.
We have something in common right off the bat with people who may otherwise be opposed to us.
cat advocates are animal lovers, and we're animal lovers. And I don't believe that cat advocates would want to see birds being torn to shreds.
So the answer is all cats indoors and all other cats gone.
We should have cats, but we should have cats inside our houses.
Or at the ends of leashes.
You can even leash them. That's an option. I know it sounds really silly to some people, but you can take your cat on a walk.
That is, if you can get them to cooperate.
Oh my gosh, he's gonna get out.
We can actually walk down the sidewalk to the street corner with her and back, and we can take her to the park and walk around the park. And she thinks she can fight dogs.
Hello, I'm Kevin Watler, and this is your CMR Daily Buzz. Here's a summary of some of Cayman's latest headlines. The National Roads Authority will host 2 public meetings next month on the East-West Arterial Extension. The public meetings will be held on February 7th and 9th from 6 to 9 p.m. in Northside and Bodden Town. 3 firearms from a male passenger arriving from Canada at the Owen Roberts International Airport was seized by the Cayman Islands Customs and Border Control. The passenger was arrested and remain in custody, and investigations are ongoing. 24 new officers have officially joined the Cayman Islands Customs and Border Control Service following 21 weeks of intense training. This is the largest graduating class for the CBC. Marking a historic moment, the Cayman Islands government's office in Washington, D.C. was opened officially last Thursday. Noting the significance of the opening, the governor noted that the UK fully supports the office and its remit. During 2022 alone, the Office of the Ombudsman was notified of 101 data breaches and received 28 complaints, as well as 136 inquiries. Saturday was International Data Protection Day. Speaking of data breaches, a vaccine challenge held by the Ministry of Tourism and Transport to incentivize the public to get vaccinated against COVID-19 breached data protection policy, the Office of the Ombudsman has found. The names of the winners of the vaccine challenge were published. That data was sensitive personal data under the Data Protection Act, as it revealed the vaccination status of the data subjects. Now for your CMR weather update. It's brought to you by WG Charters. Sunrise at 7, partly cloudy skies are expected when the temperature's at 83 degrees Fahrenheit and humidity at 71% like the forecast calls for. It will feel like it's in the mid to high 80s. Winds from the east at 10 to 20 miles per hour and the sun sets at 6:17. At nighttime, the temperature falls to the mid 70s. Looking forward, similar weather conditions are expected. If you would like to know more on any of these stories, visit CaymanMallRoad.com or follow Cayman Mall Road on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter, and YouTube. That's it for now on A Daily Buzz. Thank you for joining me. Please stay safe, and God bless.
Thank you for tuning in to another episode of The Cold Hard Truth on Bobo 89.1 FM. Cayman's #1 talk show is live weekdays from 7:30 a.m. Never miss an episode again. Watch anytime on CMR's Facebook and YouTube channels for the latest show episodes. Don't forget to follow us online on our social media channels. And visit CaymanMarlRoad.com for all the latest news and community happenings.